Chapter 39-36. There was a subtle change in God King Evil Soul's eyes. Although the other party's meaning was clear, this sentence sounded a little strange. God King Evil Soul suppressed his anger and did not care about these small details. The black robe was shrouded in a black mist, and the scarlet eyes under the cloak flickered with cold flames. "Kid, you know that I will come for revenge, but you dare to stay here instead of running away? It seems like you are really not afraid of death. Or are you saying that you were originally ordered to assassinate me?" God King Evil Soul stared at Ji Tianqing, observing his expression and the changes in his eyes. He wanted to find out the truth. Although the truth was no longer important, the other party was definitely going to die today. But if he could dig out the secrets of God King Blue Scorpion before he killed the other party, he would still be very happy. Ji Tianqing sneered and said in a playful tone, "If I tell you that I am only traveling the major star zones and have nothing to do with you or God King Blue Scorpion, would you believe me?" Ha ha ha. A cold laugh came from under the wide cloak. The flames in the scarlet eyes also became brighter. "You are about to die and you still want to play tricks on me. You are really audacious. Forget it, I don't like it when you speak while standing. Let's wait until you are defeated and kneel in front of me. Then we can have a good talk." After saying that, God King Evil Soul waved his wide sleeves and gave the order to attack. Instantly, more than 30 God King experts and nearly 1,000 God Lord experts took out their divine weapons and accumulated a vast amount of divine power in their bodies. Everyone formed a battle formation and joined forces to unleash their divine abilities and ultimate techniques to besiege Ji Tianqing. At this moment, Ji Tianqing took out a black divine pagoda and summoned many friends and family. Swoosh! Swoosh! As the white light flashed, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Long, Qian Yu, Hei Long, Chao Qingyu, Yank, and Bai Feng all flew out one after another. Even Zhen Hong, Lin Shui, God Lord Blood Illusion, God Lord Blood Dragon, and Left Emissary Jin, these God Lord experts, had appeared. Ever since Ji Tianqing returned to the Dragon Realm, these people had been cultivating in seclusion and did not have a chance to fight. Now, they had all become peak divine lords, but they had fallen into shackles. No one could break through to the Divine King realm. Therefore, in the past few years, they had told Ji Tianqing that if there was a chance to fight, they must participate. Because they didn't have any fortuitous encounters, they could only seek breakthroughs in battles. Swish! Swish! In the blink of an eye, more than 10 people appeared beside Ji Tianqing, as well as 2 huge mythological beasts. Among them, there were 9 divine king powerhouses and 9 peak divine lords. God King Evil Soul and the foreign race generals were taken aback when they saw this, their faces filled with confusion. How could this be? Isn't he alone? Damn it! He actually brought so many helpers with him. In the previous few battles, he was alone. Why did he summon so many helpers today? It seems like he felt that the previous few battles were easy and that he could finish them alone. Today, we outnumber him, so he can only summon helpers. No matter how many helpers he has, he will definitely die today. Everyone was discussing through voice transmissions. They didn't panic at all and were still aggressive. Without waiting for Yun Yao, Ji Ku and the rest to get into formation, more than 30 divine kings of the foreign races took the lead and launched an attack. Nearly 1,000 divine lords of the foreign races also joined forces to release towering divine fire and sword shadows to attack Ji Tianqing and the rest. Seeing the overwhelming sword shadows pouring down, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out endless golden light, forming a huge defensive light shield. Boom! 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 The sky full of divine skill light slammed onto the defensive light shield, creating a deafening sound. However, the golden light shield didn't budge and wasn't damaged at all. Everyone's attacks were neutralized. Taking advantage of this short period of time, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Feng and the rest had already joined forces to form a battle formation. Bai Feng, Yun Yao and the rest of the 9 divine kings were stronger. They took the lead to attack the surrounding divine kings and engaged in an intense battle. With Bai Long leading the 9 peak divine lords, they formed a battle formation in the inner circle and joined forces to fend off the attacks of the foreign race experts. At the same time, they counterattacked the divine lords of the foreign races. As for Ji Tianqing, he had already flown into the void. With the sword of burial of heaven in hand, he began his massacre. God-slaying sword. Sword of burial of heaven. Dragon elephant divine fist. Sword of daytime. Sky-piercing finger. Ji Tianqing used his left hand to perform palm techniques, fist techniques and finger techniques while his right hand swung the sword of burial of heaven. He used all kinds of sword Dao techniques. His target was the God King Evil Soul and the 30-odd God King experts. Divine King Evil Soul wasn't in a hurry to take action. He wanted to observe the battle between the soldiers and Ji Tianqing before launching a sneak attack at the right time. He didn't expect Ji Tianqing to lock onto his divine soul aura and use his strongest killing move on him. Seeing the sky-piercing finger coming at him, he instinctively raised his arms to block in front of him. His body emitted a bloody light that shot into the sky and condensed into a barrier. Ji Tianqing revealed a playful sneer when he saw Yi Futian perform such a divine ability. Moreover, the divine ability and divine power were rather special. Bam! Following a dull explosion, Divine King Evil Soul's bloody light barrier was shattered into pieces on the spot. His left arm was pierced through by the finger and he flew out in a sorry state. As for the 4 high-level divine kings beside him, they were struck by Ji Tianqing's sword Dao technique. They exploded into a bloody mist and their bodies collapsed. These 7th and 8th stage high-level divine kings couldn't even withstand one move from him and their divine bodies were destroyed. The bloody mist scattered and miserable cries were heard. A few divine sparks retreated in a panic. Although Divine King Evil Soul was still around, they couldn't care less as they fled into the void desperately. At the same time, Ji Tianqing used a few more divine abilities to shatter the godheads from thousands of miles away. Swish! Divine King Evil Soul was about to counterattack when he had already teleported thousands of miles away and collected all the divine sparks that scattered across the sky. Immediately after, Ji Tianqing waved his sword and slashed out a few thousand feet long sword lights into the encirclement of the foreign race divine lords. Following a few loud bangs, more than 100 high-level divine lords were sliced into pieces by the sword lights. There was a gap in the encirclement. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the rest took the opportunity to break out. They killed a bunch of high-level divine lords and continued to fight with the foreign race divine kings. Ji Tianqing controlled the entire battlefield and forced Divine King Evil Soul to retreat. At the same time, he kept killing Divine King experts one after another. An intense battle unfolded on the Ur Star. As time passed, everyone kept moving further away, causing the battlefield to become wider and wider. It almost reached a radius of 100,000 miles. As everyone fought, the divine art light projection had already covered a radius of 100,000 miles and kept flashing in the void. Chapter 39-37. Bai Feng was still alright. He had already experienced many battles. Even though the battle this time was very intense, he was still very calm. He was neither arrogant nor rash, and he was able to attack and defend appropriately. However, Yin Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Long and the others had not fought for a long time. They had been in seclusion for too long. Many of their divine Tao insights and battle experiences could only be deduced and honed in their minds. Now that they finally had the chance to use them, they unleashed their full strength. Therefore, everyone unleashed a battle power that was higher than their cultivation level. They actually managed to force the foreign race divine kings to retreat. Even Qian Yu and Black Dragon were in high spirits. They stirred up waves in the void, creating torrential rain and blazing flames. Both of them had just broken through to the Divine King realm not long ago. They only had the power of a low-level Divine King. However, with their powerful bloodline talents, they were able to withstand the attacks of middle-level Divine Kings. At the same time, they unleashed shocking divine powers and secret techniques to quickly kill the foreign race Divine Lords. Yun Yao and Ji Ku's performance was the most eye-catching. Ji Ku wore a fiery red dress and held a divine spear. Her entire body was surrounded by 5 colored holy flames. She was like a divine phoenix. She soared through the void and swept across the battlefield. With the power of a middle-level Divine King, she forcefully killed many middle-level Divine Kings. Even if she encountered a high-level Divine King, she would not be defeated. She was able to use all kinds of divine powers and ultimate skills of the Phoenix race. She fought until heavenly flames covered 100,000 miles. Countless shadows of phoenixes flashed. Yun Yao was dressed in white. She was as white as the moon. She wielded 2 swords and fought on the battlefield. Her aura was unparalleled. Even if she was fighting, her movements and techniques were light and graceful. She was as graceful as a fairy. She slashed out all kinds of sword lights with her 2 swords. They were like shooting stars that streaked across the void. They were like the bright moon that dispelled the darkness. Every time he turned around, he could easily kill a large number of powerful outsider experts. Originally, Ji Tianqing could have taken care of the Divine King Evil Soul and the foreign race Divine Lords alone. If he fought alone, he only needed to use divine powers like the Sword Rain and the heaven-destroying Sword Array to kill thousands of foreign race Divine Lords in 15 minutes. In another hour, he would be able to kill God King Evil Soul and the other 35 God Kings. However, in today's battle, he had to fulfill everyone's request and give them a chance to hone their battle skills. Therefore, he was not in a hurry to end the battle. When he was fighting with God King Evil Soul and the others, he did not use his full strength. While dealing with 6 to 7 godly kings, he also paid attention to the situation on the battlefield. He diverted some of his attention to protect Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Wushuang, White Dragon, and the others. The purpose of this battle was to hone everyone's skills and not put their lives in danger. If it were ordinary peak divine kings, it was very hard to have the strength to control the entire scene like this. But for Ji Tianqing, it was a piece of cake. Just like that, the battle that was supposed to end in 2 hours was dragged on for 4 hours and still wasn't over. Everyone was enjoying themselves to the fullest, but they still wanted to continue and were not in a hurry to end it. At that moment, 70% of the 1,000 alien race Divine Lords had been killed. There were only about 300 left. Out of the 35 God King experts, only 16 were left. Moreover, all of them were injured quite badly. God King Evil Soul was also covered in wounds. He was dripping with blood and looked terrible. At this point in the battle, he could already see the outcome of his defeat. Originally, he wanted to escape with the surviving soldiers. However, the soldiers were being held back by Ji Tianqing's friends and relatives. It was impossible for them to escape. In addition, God King Evil Soul realized that Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others had used up a lot of their divine power. They seemed to be showing signs of exhaustion. Even Ji Tianqing's strength and methods were not as powerful and terrifying as he had imagined. He seemed to be an arrow at the end of its flight. Therefore, God King Evil Soul had a glimmer of hope and anticipation. No matter how strong they are, after 4 hours of fighting, they are at the end of their flight. As long as we can hold on for another 2 hours, we might be able to turn the tables. Thinking up to here, God King Evil Soul dismissed the thought of escaping. He resisted and counterattacked seriously and cautiously. Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry either. He pestered God King Evil Soul and a few alien race powerhouses while observing the situation of his friends and relatives. He could tell that everyone was fighting to their heart's content. After this battle with the alien race powerhouses, everyone must have gained a lot and comprehended a lot. And he also discovered something extremely interesting in this battle. That was God King Evil's soul. Even though he was wearing a loose black robe and a cloak, covering his original face. His scarlet eyes, the black gas shrouding his entire body, as well as the special blood-like divine ability, all made Ji Tianqing think of a race. Fiend race. That's right. Ji Tianqing saw the shadow of the fiend race on God King Evil's soul. Before today, he always thought that only the 5 elements world had fiends. But looking at it now, this matter did not seem to be that simple. It was also precisely because of this that he was not in a hurry to kill God King Evil's soul. He was still planning to capture God King Evil's soul after the battle ended and investigate properly. And right at this time, his divine sense detected that in the void 100,000 miles away, there were 2 divine warships silently approaching. Those 2 divine warships were also black and merged into one with the void. They quietly approached, virtually difficult to discover. When he discovered them, Ji Tianqing's first reaction was that God King Evil's soul had called for help. After all, this was God King Evil's soul's territory. There were more than a dozen stars nearby. At the very least, dozens of God Kings could gather. But Ji Tianqing secretly observed for a moment and discovered that the situation was not right. Those 2 divine warships came from the southwest, while God King Evil's soul came from the northeast. In addition, when those 2 divine warships were still 70,000 miles away from the Ur star, they stopped in the void and did not approach anymore. It looked like those 2 divine warships were hiding in the void to watch the battle and had no intention of interfering. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, a thought popped up in his mind, vaguely guessing the other party's identity. Could it be God King Blue Scorpion's people? That's very possible. If the other party was God King Evil Soul's reinforcements, he would definitely let Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others return to the Divine Pagoda to recuperate as soon as possible. He would end this battle and then face the reinforcements. But since the other party was not God King Evil Soul's reinforcements, he was not in a hurry. While fighting methodically, he still silently observed the movements of the 2 divine warships. Very quickly, another 2 hours passed. The battle had finally come to an end. Thousands of foreign race divine lords had been slaughtered, and 35 God Kings had also been killed. God King Evil Soul, who was severely injured and on the verge of collapse, was personally captured by Ji Tianqing. Yun Yao, Ji Ku, and the others' robes were also stained with blood. Many of them had suffered serious injuries. Even though their divine powers were depleted and their faces were tired, they were in high spirits and cheered in celebration. Ji Tianqing encouraged everyone and sent them back into the Divine Pagoda to recuperate. Soon, only he and the dying God King Evil Soul were left in the void. At this moment, the 2 divine warships 70,000 miles away were actually about to turn around and leave. Chapter 39-38. Ji Tianqing had guessed correctly. The people in the 2 divine ships were God King Blue Scorpion and his subordinates. 4 hours ago, the 2 divine warships had passed by nearby. The scouts and several God King generals discovered that the golden Ur star was flashing with dazzling divine light. When God King Blue Scorpion learned of this, he immediately used his arts to observe. He discovered that the Ur star was not only flashing with divine light, but it was also clearly smaller. From the frequency and scene of the divine light flashing, there should be a large number of experts fighting. God King Blue Scorpion immediately decided to have the 2 divine ships conceal their tracks and silently approach the Ur star to investigate. Thus, the 2 divine ships concealed their tracks and divine light and quietly approached the Ur star. 70,000 miles away from the Ur star, the 2 divine ships stopped and hid in the void to observe the battle. It was not just God King Blue Scorpion. More than a dozen God Kings used their divine senses to observe the battle on the Ur star. When they saw that one of the groups was God King Evil Soul and his subordinates, they were wild with excitement. Many God King generals praised God King Blue Scorpion's foresight and admired him greatly. Fortunately, they did not have Qiong Xing waiting. Otherwise, they would not have been able to see the battle between God King Evil Soul and his subordinates. Only now did everyone understand that God King Evil Soul had led his elite troops here on a mission. However, on the other side of the battle, the God Kings and God Lords led by Ji Tianqing, they were unfamiliar with them. They racked their brains and pondered for a long time, but they could not figure out who that group was or why they were fighting God King Evil Soul. What was most inconceivable was that God King Evil Soul's side had more people and was clearly stronger overall. But in the end, God King Evil Soul's side suffered heavy casualties, while the foreign experts were not killed. This result shocked everyone. They could only find it hard to believe. Of course, it did not matter who that group was or where they came from. They were able to defeat God King Evil Soul, kill all his subordinates, and capture him. This was worthy of everyone's celebration. I really didn't expect that it was actually a bunch of foreign race experts who helped us defeat the Evil Soul God King. Ha ha ha. The experts under the Evil Soul God King have all been killed, and he has also been captured by that foreign race's God King. His fate is unknown, and our crisis has been resolved. We don't need to do anything to resolve the crisis and obtain the final victory. Perhaps this is the will of the heavens. Speaking of which, that foreign race youth in white robes is really strong. Him beating the Evil Soul Divine King is simply a one-sided slaughter. He's definitely a peak Divine King. How strange. There are no peak Divine Kings in our Scorpio galaxy. Where did that alien youth come from? Many generals were in high spirits as they discussed animatedly. But some people noticed that God King Blue Scorpion's face was rather gloomy, his eyes like ice. If one looked closely, they would discover that there was a hint of anger and shock hidden in the depths of his eyes. Clearly, after Blue Scorpion God King observed for a moment, he recognized that the white-robed youth was precisely Long Yan's brother. Not only was that person a peak Divine King, his strength was even more tyrannical than Long Yan's. He couldn't afford to offend such a character. He didn't even want to meet him. He didn't dare guarantee that Ji Tianqing wouldn't kill him after seeing him. Thus, after the battle on the Ore Star ended, he ordered the two divine ships to immediately turn around and leave. He had already seen Ji Tianqing capture the evil-souled Divine King with his own eyes. No matter what grudges they had, the evil-souled Divine King would not have a good end now that things had developed to this stage. Next, he had to return to the front lines and lead the soldiers in a counterattack, using this opportunity to defeat the evil-souled Divine King. Not only did he have to reclaim the lost land, but he also had to seize the evil-souled Divine King's territory and completely occupy the Scorpio galaxy. Although the soldiers were somewhat puzzled by his orders, they immediately carried them out. But at this moment, a divine soul voice transmission rang out in God King Blue Scorpion's mind. "Since you're here, don't leave. This king has something to say." This familiar voice caused God King Blue Scorpion's body to tremble, his expression turning extremely ugly. "It's over. He's already discovered me. I shouldn't have been so close to the Ore Star, and I shouldn't have watched the battle for so long." God King Blue Scorpion knew that this was bad. His mind immediately tensed, and he instinctively wanted to speed up and flee. However, his divine sense detected that Ji Tianqing had already left the Ore Star and was traversing the void in pursuit of the divine ships. His opponent was even faster than the divine ships and would catch up in a few seconds. God King Blue Scorpion was in complete despair. He knew that it was too late to run now. Since he could not hide, he could only brace himself and face it. After all, Ji Tianqing's tone was calm, as if he had no intention of killing him. "Stop." Thus, God King Blue Scorpion immediately made the decision to order the two divine ships to stop. The officers controlling the divine ships were somewhat confused, not understanding what God King Blue Scorpion wanted to do. But as God King Blue Scorpion's loyal officers, they carried out the order without hesitation. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the two divine ships stopped and floated in the void. At this moment, the Blue Scorpion God King warned the generals, "Everyone, stay in the ship and don't come out. I'm going to see that expert. Just wait for my orders." With that, the Blue Scorpion God King opened the cabin door of the divine ship and stepped into the void, flying toward Ji Tianqing. The officers on the ship were all dumbfounded, not understanding what God King Blue Scorpion was up to. Many people were worried for him. They all took out their divine weapons and maintained their vigilance. The moment something went wrong, they would rush out of the ship to rescue the Blue Scorpion God King. At the same time, Ji Tianqing and the Blue Scorpion God King met in the void. The Blue Scorpion God King stole a glance at Ji Tianqing. After confirming that there was no killing intent in his eyes, he bowed and said, "Blue Scorpion greets Senior." Although he didn't know what Ji Tianqing's intentions were. However, he felt that Ji Tianqing was not an evil person, so he was taking a gamble. He gambled that the other party wouldn't kill him, so he treated him with courtesy. As the saying went, one doesn't slap a smiling face. Since he was so polite, the other party probably wouldn't attack him. Ji Tianqing sized up the Blue Scorpion God King, his lips curling into a playful smile. "You seem to have become much smarter in half a year." The Blue Scorpion God King didn't know how to respond. He could only remain silent and stand obediently. At this moment, Ji Tianqing reached into the divine pagoda and pulled out the heavily injured God King Evil Soul, who was on the verge of death. He held the God King Evil Soul in his hand and asked the Blue Scorpion God King, "I heard that the two of you started a war over the position of Star Field Master." The Blue Scorpion God King hurriedly bowed and answered truthfully, "That's right. God King Evil Soul started the war and sent an army to invade my territory, slaughtering countless people. Fortunately, I received Senior's help today to quell this war." The God King Evil Soul wasn't unconscious. Seeing Ji Tianqing and the Blue Scorpion God King talking, he was filled with grief and indignation. The two of them really do know each other. This guy is Blue Scorpion's helper. He didn't admit it before. Chapter 39-39. God King Evil Soul was both furious and helpless. He was certain that Ji Tianqing was God King Blue Scorpion's helper. But he had already been defeated and captured by Ji Tianqing. His life and death were beyond his control, and he was powerless to resist. At this time, God King Blue Scorpion was also trying to figure out Ji Tianqing's intentions. He defeated God King Evil Soul and asked us about the Domain Lord position. Could it be that he wants to take control of the Scorpion Star Zone and become its master? Both sides had their own agendas. Ji Tianqing said to God King Blue Scorpion, "I've already killed God King Evil Soul's subordinates. Now that I've captured him, this war should be over. You can launch a counterattack, seize his territory, and take control of the entire Scorpion Star Zone. That shouldn't be a problem, right?" God King Blue Scorpion was very surprised that Ji Tianqing would help him. But on second thought, he understood Ji Tianqing's intentions. He immediately bowed and said excitedly, "Many thanks for Senior's help. Blue Scorpion is eternally grateful. Once Blue Scorpion returns to the front lines, I'll lead a counterattack and take control of the entire Scorpion Star Zone in 10 years at most. However, Blue Scorpion is weak and doesn't have the right to control it. Only a powerhouse like you is qualified to sit on the seat of the Master of the Star Field. This junior is willing to be your right-hand man and be at your beck and call. I'll be absolutely loyal." God King Blue Scorpion was very smart. He knew that the other party had the ambition to dominate the Scorpion Star Zone. If he dared fight for the position of Domain Lord, only death would await him. Since that was the case, he would throw in his lot with Ji Tianqing and become his lackey and henchman. Even if Ji Tianqing wanted him to be a puppet region master, he wouldn't have any complaints. The reason why Ji Tianqing asked Blue Scorpion God King to stay was precisely because of this. He had been considering how to search the entire Scorpion Star Zone in a short time and find clues about his master's death. It would take him at least 1,000 years to search all the stars on his own. However, if he supported the Blue Scorpion God King to become the master of the star field and had the Blue Scorpion God King send people to search for clues, it would be much more convenient. Naturally, he wouldn't stay in the Scorpio Star Zone for long, nor did he care about the position of Star Zone Lord. Therefore, he would let Blue Scorpion Divine King be a puppet and temporarily take over the position of Region Master. You are indeed very sensible. Seeing that the Blue Scorpion God King had taken the initiative to submit, Ji Tianqing nodded in satisfaction. After confirming Ji Tianqing's intentions and thoughts, the Blue Scorpion Divine King heaved a sigh of relief. He once again bowed in delight and began to flatter Ji Tianqing. Seeing his groveling appearance, the evil soul God King sneered disdainfully, Blue Scorpion, you're still used to being someone else's lackey. Truly unbearably lowly. If I hadn't met this fellow, how could someone like you be worthy of being my opponent? The Blue Scorpion God King was humiliated in front of his face, so he was naturally enraged. He subconsciously retaliated. God King Evil Soul, you laugh at me for being a lackey, but aren't you also someone else's lackey? If not for you defecting to God King Longwind and having a Peak Divine King as your backer, would you be worthy of vying for the position of Region Master with me? Bullshit. The Evil Soul God King flew into a rage and said with a heart full of resentment, this seat only submitted in name. He has always been serving Lord Supreme and doesn't move about the Scorpio Star Zone at all. These few years, have you ever seen him intervene in our great battle? If God King Longwind personally took action in this great battle, would this seat lose? If God King Longwind personally came here, the ones kneeling and begging for mercy right now would be you guys. Ha ha ha. You're truly delusional. The Blue Scorpion Divine King mocked mercilessly, your backer, God King Longwind, is nothing compared to Senior Long Tian. The two overlords mocked and cursed at each other. But Ji Tianqing heard some useful information from the Evil Soul God King's words. He immediately raised his palm and interrupted the two Divine Kings' quarrel. God King Evil Soul, what's the background of your backer, God King Longwind? Also, you said earlier that God King Longwind is serving Lord Supreme? What Supreme? Which Supreme? Ji Tianqing stared at the Evil Soul God King and asked in a solemn tone. The Evil Soul God King smiled coldly and said, you're called Long Tian, right? If this seat didn't guess wrongly, you should be a Peak Divine King from the Dragon Realm. Ho ho. My backer, God King Longwind, is a Peak Divine King from the Divine World. Furthermore, behind him, there's even Lord Supreme. That's a supreme powerhouse who far surpasses Peak Divine Kings. Long Tian, Lord Supreme and God King Longwind both chose this seat as the Scorpio Region Master. If you dare to kill me and dare to snatch the position of Region Master, that's becoming enemies with Lord Supreme. This seat advises you to think thrice before you act. Presently, the Evil Soul God King wanted to preserve his life and could only bring out his backer to threaten Ji Tianqing, hoping that Ji Tianqing would back off in the face of difficulties. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, seeming to be more and more interested. He turned his head to look at Blue Scorpion God King and asked, is what he said true? Blue Scorpion God King's expression was somewhat hesitant, afraid that Ji Tianqing would be frightened and really let the Evil Soul God King go. But he did not dare to say false words to deceive Ji Tianqing and could only nod his head and say, there's indeed such a thing. However, that God King Longwind rarely shows his face and virtually doesn't interfere with the Scorpio region's matters. As for that Lord Supreme, it's just hearsay and rumors. Nobody has seen before with their own eyes. Blue Scorpion God King was tactfully persuading Ji Tianqing not to be frightened by the Evil Soul God King. The Evil Soul God King immediately panicked and said in a certain tone, bullshit. Blue Scorpion, you don't understand the situation at all, don't talk nonsense. God King Longwind will reach the distant star within a month. After this seat becomes the Scorpio region lord, I'll be able to see Lord Supreme with my own eyes. After refuting Blue Scorpion God King, he said to Ji Tianqing again, Long Tian, if you let me go today and don't interfere with my struggle with Blue Scorpion anymore, I can take it as if this matter never happened. You rest assured, God King Longwind and Lord Supreme won't pursue the matter with you either. But if you persist in having your own way, even if you kill me, you'll also infuriate Lord Supreme. You have to consider the consequences yourself. Hearing these words, Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a cold smile full of coldness on his face. He lifted the evil soul God King and said with a smile that was not a smile, Evil soul, since this king captured you, I never thought of letting you go. You don't understand this king's nature at all. A threat like yours is completely useless to this king. Furthermore, this king just happens to want to meet that God King Longwind, as well as Lord Supreme behind him. Seeing his firm attitude, Blue Scorpion God King heaved a sigh in relief once more. The large rock hanging in his heart finally landed. But the evil soul God King was filled with anxiety and hurriedly roared angrily, Long Tian, if you dare to kill me, you'll definitely regret it. God King Longwind will arrive very soon. At that time, he'll definitely take revenge for me. Really noisy. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows. His right hand fired out a stream of divine soul power, smacking into the evil soul God King's head. Immediately, the evil soul God King's 2 eyes rolled back, and he fell unconscious. Ji Tianqing put him away into the 9 heavens 10 absolute pagoda and suppressed him in the 2nd level space. Following that, he took out another jade slip and said to Blue Scorpion God King, you're a smart person. You should know what you need to do when this king supports you to be the region lord. Chapter 3940. The Blue Scorpion God King naturally understood. The other party wanted him to be the master of a star zone, but he was only a puppet. And as a puppet, he had to be absolutely loyal. He originally thought that Ji Tianqing would give him some kind of poison pill or use some kind of ability to threaten and control him. But when he saw the jade slip in Ji Tianqing's hand, he recalled the oath the Golden Crow Patriarch had been forced to swear. The Blue Scorpion God King's body trembled, and he asked bitterly, Senior Long Tian, must I swear that oath? Of course. Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, you are very smart, but you are also someone who goes with the wind and has no loyalty to speak of. In order for this king to trust you, you can only swear a heavenly oath. Compared to using poison pills or abilities to control you, this king still believes in the power of the heavens more. The Blue Scorpion God King immediately fell silent, his expression and eyes filled with helplessness. He knew that in this situation, he could only accept without any room to resist. If he dared to refuse, Ji Tianqing would most likely kill him and support someone else to become the master of a star zone. In any case, the master of a star zone was just a puppet, and any high-level God King could take the position. After hesitating for a while, the Blue Scorpion God King could only nod and say, Fine, I accept. Then, he received the jade slip from Ji Tianqing with both hands and read its contents with his divine sense. The jade slip recorded the heavenly oath Ji Tianqing had prepared long ago, and there were nearly 1,000 words on it. The Blue Scorpion God King carefully read it and found that this heavenly oath was very strict, down to every word. He took a few deep breaths before reciting in a low voice, Today, I, Blue Scorpion, swear to the heavens. From today onwards, I swear loyalty to Long Tian of the Dragon Realm and temporarily take over the position of Master of Scorpion Star Zone. I will do my best and will not dare to slack off. First, I will be absolutely loyal to Long Tian at all times. I will not have the slightest disobedience and obey any of Long Tian's orders. Otherwise, Blue Scorpion will suffer the wrath of the heavens and be annihilated by divine lightning. Blue Scorpion's relatives and friends would also be punished by the heavens, secondly, no matter when or where, you must unconditionally protect Long Tian's interests. You must not allow Long Tian's interests and reputation to be damaged, and you must not harbor any resentment. In Blue Scorpion God King's view, this heavenly Tao oath was extremely detailed and long-winded. It was so long-winded that every single detail and every single possibility was strictly limited. The more God King Blue Scorpion read, the more humiliated and indignant he felt. He even wanted to cry. At this moment, he finally understood how painful it was for the Golden Crow clan leader to be forced to swear an oath to the heavenly Tao. Now, he'd followed in the footsteps of the Sun Crow Patriarch and made such a detestable oath to the Tao of the heavens to completely restrict himself. Soon, he was halfway through the heavenly Tao oath. Countless strands of divine light appeared around the Blue Scorpion God King, and there was also a mystical Taoist rhyme above his head. In the depths of the void, muffled sounds of thunder could be heard. It was as if the heavenly Tao was chanting. 100 breaths later, the Blue Scorpion Divine King finally braced himself and finished reciting the heavenly Tao oath. At this moment, the divine light and Taoist rhyme around him bloomed like a blazing sun, becoming dazzling and resplendent. He could clearly sense that the heavens had already accepted this oath and were responding to it. And he had completely become Ji Tianqing's loyal lackey, the kind that did not dare to disobey or offend. The divine light that filled the sky gradually dissipated, and the Taoist rhyme also became thin and transparent. The Blue Scorpion God King looked like he had nothing left to live for. He absent-mindedly held the jade slip and returned it to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing put away the jade slip with a smile, then took out several dozen communication jade slips and handed them to him. "All right, you've made a wise choice. As long as you work loyally for this king, not only will your life not be in danger, but you will also enjoy glory and wealth. This king will help you deal with the most troublesome enemies, but you will have to take back the territory yourself. Take these communication jade slips. If there are any important matters, you must report to this king and ask for instructions." The Blue Scorpion God King took the jade slips and bowed respectfully. "I will follow your Majesty's orders. If your Majesty has no other instructions, then this subordinate will take his leave." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, Go ahead." The Blue Scorpion God King bowed and was about to leave. But he was still a little worried and could not help but ask, "Your Majesty, how will you deal with the evil soul God King? This subordinate wants to remind you that you must not be deceived by him, and you must not let the tiger return to the mountain." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "Does this king need you to teach me how to do things? What, have you forgotten the oath you just made to the heavenly Tao? This subordinate dares not, Your Majesty, please calm down." The Blue Scorpion God King was shocked and hurriedly bowed and apologized. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and sent him away. After the Blue Scorpion God King left, he turned and flew back to the Ore Star to continue devouring stars. On the other side, the Blue Scorpion God King returned to the divine ship under the watchful eyes of thousands of soldiers. The moment he entered the divine ship, those nervous and vigilant God King generals immediately surrounded him. "Alliance Master, are you all right? Lord Alliance Master, what were you discussing with that white-robed youth just now? Is that white-robed youth a peak God King? Are you friends with him? Alliance Master, we saw divine light radiating from your body just now, and there was also a mysterious power. Did that expert give you pointers?" Everyone was puzzled and asked the Blue Scorpion God King at once, eager to find out more. The Blue Scorpion God King naturally would not tell the truth. Otherwise, his dignified image would instantly crumble. He suppressed his disappointment and humiliation and pretended to be dignified and happy. He said proudly, "That expert just now was a peak God King from the Dragon Realm, Senior Long Tian. He is my good friend and senior. This time, he specially came to the Scorpion Galaxy to help us eliminate the evil Soul God King. Now that he has captured the evil Soul God King, we will return to the front lines and prepare to lead the army to launch a counterattack." When the generals heard this, they were elated and cheered excitedly. However, there were also a few experienced generals who asked worriedly, "Alliance Master, is that Senior Long Tian really just here to help? When we take over the evil soul God King's territory and control the Scorpion Galaxy, you should be the governor, right? That Senior Long Tian probably won't snatch the position of governor, right?" What these generals were most afraid of was that the position of governor would be snatched away by someone else after they had risked their lives to fight for it. The Blue Scorpion God King understood their thoughts. He immediately patted his chest and said with a smile, "Senior Long Tian is an expert. Why would he be interested in the position of governor? Everyone, don't worry. Senior Long Tian has already told me that I will be the governor. He will not stay in the Scorpion Galaxy for long. He will only be our backer in the dark." Everyone's doubts were dispelled. They were all excited and eager to return to the front lines immediately to lead the army to launch a counterattack. Chapter 39-41. Before long, the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being and his subordinates disappeared into the void. Although Ji Tianqing had never attacked him, Ji Tianqing had never attacked him. Once he saw Ji Tianqing, he felt fear and respect from the bottom of his heart. He did not want to stay by his side for a moment longer. Because he knew that Ji Tianqing was also a peak divine king, but he was far more terrifying than the Golden Crow Patriarch and Long Yen. Furthermore, when facing this mysterious expert, he could forget about playing tricks. That would be showing off his slight skill in front of an expert and seeking his own death. Especially when he had already sworn a heavenly Tao oath. It could be said that his life and death were in Ji Tianqing's hands. Now, he could only follow Ji Tianqing's arrangements and return to lead his troops to counterattack and occupy the Scorpion Star Zone as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing returned to the Ore Star and took out the Heaven-Mending Pearl, allowing the Divine Pearl to continue devouring stars. He was not in a hurry to use the devouring divine ability. Instead, he took out the heavily injured Evil Soul Divine King and threw him on the ground. Evil Soul Divine King was still unconscious as he laid on the ground. Whoosh! Ji Tianqing waved his hand and fired out a wisp of golden light that entered Evil Soul Divine King's head. Evil Soul Divine King immediately woke up and stared at Ji Tianqing with vigilance. "Long Tian, what are you trying to do?" Evil Soul Divine King was very alert. He looked around and realized that Blue Scorpion Divine King was not present. On the desolate and cold Ore Star, there was only him and Ji Tianqing. And Ji Tianqing had not killed him until now. He saw the hope of survival and thought that Ji Tianqing wanted to negotiate with him. Blue Scorpion Divine King is not present. "Speak, what conditions do you want for you to let me go?" Ji Tianqing looked down at him from above and said with a cold smile, "You think that this king did not kill you and kept you alive to negotiate with you? Do you think that this king is afraid of the backer behind you? Am I not?" Evil Soul Divine King asked back. Ji Tianqing sneered again and said, "Now that your life is in the hands of this king can't be bothered to talk nonsense with you. The reason why I didn't kill you is because I still have a few questions to ask." The Evil Soul God King's eyes lit up as hope ignited in his heart. He hurriedly asked, "Then after I answer your question, can you let me go?" He. How could it be that simple? Ji Tianqing smiled and asked in a deep voice, "Tell me everything you know about God King Everlasting Wind and that Supreme." God King Evil Soul was silent, the flames of anger and humiliation flickering in his scarlet eyes. A moment later, he asked in a deep voice, "What if I refuse to answer? Are you going to kill me?" "Ha! If that's the case, don't even think about getting any news about them." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said with a disdainful tone, "You've probably forgotten one thing. Even if I kill you, I can still use the soul-searching technique to refine your soul and memories. At that time, why would I need to go through the trouble of interrogating you?" God King Evil Soul's body instantly stiffened. The last trace of hope in his heart was also shattered. Not only was his life in the hands of Ji Tianqing, he did not even have the slightest bit of initiative now. There was no hope of turning the tables. However, there was still a trace of stubbornness in his heart. He asked in a deep voice, "Then what are you waiting for? Aren't you going to kill me?" Ji Tianqing's expression was still indifferent as he said, "If you're bent on dying, this king can of course fulfill your wish. However, this king has long seen that your desire to live is very strong, so I'm giving you one last chance. Don't waste time, it's time for you to make your choice." God King Evil Soul completely abandoned any thoughts of luck and could only answer truthfully, "I haven't met God King Everlasting Wind many times. I only know that he comes from the God realm and works for Lord Supreme. A few hundred years ago, he came to the Scorpio Star region to find me and said that he would support me to become the region lord. However, I wanted to be a puppet region lord and listen to all his instructions and arrangements. I naturally disdained to meet him and fought with him. However, I lost miserably in less than 10 moves." God King Evil Soul recounted the process of how he got to know God King Everlasting Wind to Ji Tianqing. God King Everlasting Wind had always appeared and disappeared mysteriously, his whereabouts erratic. He would come to the Scorpio Star region roughly once every 100 years. And each time he came, he would bring away massive amounts of cultivation resources and urge God King Evil Soul to unify the entire star region as soon as possible. In these few hundred years, the cultivation resources that God King Evil Soul plundered for him were worth more than 1 trillion. But even so, God King Everlasting Wind was still unsatisfied and would often reprimand God King Evil Soul. As for the supreme behind God King Everlasting Wind, God King Evil Soul had never seen him before and only heard of him a few times. He could roughly determine that the supreme also came from the God realm. Furthermore, his realm surpassed God King. Apart from this, there was no other information or clues. Ji Tianqing had long guessed that the supreme was one of the 5 great God emperors. But God King Evil Soul's status was too low and could not find out more information at all, making him rather disappointed. This king remembered that you said previously that God King Everlasting Wind is currently on the way back to Distant Star, right? Ji Tianqing asked. God King Evil Soul nodded. Ji Tianqing asked again, "Then he should know that you brought many experts to come and kill this king?" God King Evil Soul nodded again. "Very good." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a meaningful smile, "Immediately send him a message asking for help and have him come here to save you." God King Evil Soul was stunned for a moment and immediately guessed his intentions. He immediately growled in astonishment, "Are you crazy? You want to lure him here and set up a trap to kill him? Why not?" Ji Tianqing raised his brows. God King Evil Soul said with a cold smile, "He's a peak God King. Furthermore, each time he comes to the Scorpio Star region, there are 6 God King realm guards by his side. All of them are high-ranking God Kings. Long Tian, don't blame me for not warning you. You're courting death." God King Evil Soul was naturally not worried that Ji Tianqing would be killed. He was just unwilling to do so, in case God King Everlasting Wind settled scores with him, supporting someone else to become the region lord while he became an abandoned child. Ji Tianqing saw through his thoughts and said with a contemptuous tone, "In your eyes, God King Everlasting Wind and his 6 guards might be unattainable experts. But in this king's eyes, it's merely a small problem that can be resolved in an instant. Remember, this king is not bargaining with you. This is an order." Since it was an order, God King Evil Soul naturally knew the outcome of disobeying an order. He silently took out a special transmission jade slip and asked God King Everlasting Wind for help. Even though this was him being forced to put on an act, deliberately luring God King Everlasting Wind here. But this was also a realistic portrayal of his current situation. Therefore, his voice and tone were very natural. Even the content of his request for help did not need to bother to fabricate, just saying it as it was would do. Of course, he did not reveal that he was captured by Ji Tianqing. He only said that he was heavily injured and that the soldiers under his command also suffered heavy casualties, which was why he was able to injure Ji Tianqing. Currently, he was on the run, hiding from Ji Tianqing's pursuit and hiding on the firmament star. He hoped that God King Everlasting Wind would hurry over to save him, kill the foreign race God King, and quell the chaos in the Scorpio star region. Chapter 39-42. After God King Evil Soul finished speaking and was about to send out the communication jade slip, Ji Tianqing stopped him. The firmament star you speak of, which star is it in the vicinity? God King Evil Soul pointed to the northwest, a star about 200 million miles away. That star was not considered big, but there were living beings living there. However, there were very few high God King experts. Ji Tianqing nodded, only then did he tacitly allow God King Evil Soul to send out the message. Whoosh! The communication jade simplified into a stream of light, disappearing into the pitch-black void. God King Evil Soul hurriedly said to Ji Tianqing, logically speaking, God King Changfeng should be arriving at the distant star soon. If he receives my message and immediately rushes over to help, he will probably arrive in a month. You still have a month's time, you can set up a trap on the firmament star in advance. Hearing his words, Ji Tianqing was somewhat surprised and asked, God King Evil Soul, aren't you the candidate that God King Changfeng supported as the domain lord? Logically speaking, you should be hoping that he comes to kill this king. Why are you helping this king to come up with a plan? God King Evil Soul's eyes were somewhat gloomy as he said in a deep voice, although God King Changfeng is my backer, he did not give me any practical help. Even if I defeated God King Blue Scorpion and occupied the Scorpion Star Zone, that was my contribution. Yet, he was stronger and wanted to be above me, making me a puppet domain lord. He only knew how to take, desperately squeezing the resources of the Scorpion Star Zone. How can I not hate such a bastard? If you can kill him, it might be a good thing for me. Ji Tianqing smiled, just these reasons. I'm afraid it's not enough, right? God King Evil Soul knew that he could not hide it from him and continued, since he can make me the domain lord, he can naturally support others. Therefore, to him, I'm nothing more than an abandoned pawn that can be abandoned at a crucial moment. If he could help me like how you helped God King Blue Scorpion, the Scorpion Star Zone would have long been under my control. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing asked again, you cherish your life very much and are quite shrewd. Naturally, you know how to survive. I'm very curious. Why don't you beg me to let you replace the Blue Scorpion Divine King and support you to become the region master? In any case, you've already said that no matter who supports you as the governor, you're just a puppet. God King Evil Soul sneered and said, at the beginning, I indeed had this thought. After all, you don't seem to have a very close relationship with the Blue Scorpion God King. However, I am even more aware that even if you can defeat God King Eternal Wind, it is ultimately impossible for you to defeat that sovereign. As long as that supreme martial artist makes a move, you will definitely die. If I were to side with you, I would be killed by that sovereign sooner or later. Ji Tianqing immediately understood. He chuckled and said, so, you are feigning civility with this king just to save your life temporarily. You don't want to rely on me because you don't want to offend that sovereign. That's the only way you can stay alive. After this king and the Blue Scorpion Divine King are killed by that supreme being, you will be able to live until the end and still be the domain lord, right? God King Evil Soul remained silent. It could be considered a tacit admission. Ji Tianqing said with a playful smile, I have to say, only a fence-sitter like you who swings with the wind can possibly live until the end. But unfortunately, you are destined to be disappointed after encountering me. Seeing him so confident, God King Evil Soul sneered inwardly but did not open his mouth to argue. Because he knew that angering Ji Tianqing now would not do him any good. The two were silent for a while. Ji Tianqing opened his mouth again and asked, God King Evil Soul, where are you from? You shouldn't be born in the distant star, right? God King Evil Soul revealed a puzzled look and asked, "Why are you suddenly asking this? Could it be that you want to investigate my background?" "That's right." Ji Tianqing admitted frankly. God King Evil Soul was even more puzzled. He sneered and said, "I'm just a minor character that you can casually kill. What's there to investigate?" Ji Tianqing looked at him and said in a low voice, "Although there are countless foreign races in the Scorpion Star Zone with all kinds of appearances and attire, you still have to look at them. Using a black robe and black mist to cover your body and face with a cloak is still a little strange. If I'm not wrong, your true body should be as black as ink and covered in scales. You also have a pair of sharp claws. Also, your spine can't be straightened and has grown several bone spurs. If you don't use your divine power to suppress them, those bone spurs will pierce your body and grow 2 bone wings on your back. Am I right?" Ji Tianqing observed God King Evil Soul's expression as he spoke. God King Evil Soul was currently very weak. The cloak and black mist used to cover his face could no longer block Ji Tianqing's probing. His blood-stained face immediately revealed a look of shock. A trace of fear flashed across his scarlet eyes. This was his greatest secret, the truth that he had tried his best to hide for nearly 10,000 years. He had never expected that Ji Tianqing, who he had only met once, would be right. "You. Who are you?" God King Evil Soul naturally wouldn't admit it, but his vigilance toward Ji Tianqing was instantly raised to the highest level. Ji Tianqing didn't answer his question. He continued asking, "Do you have parents, relatives, or children? Where are they now? Does he have the same appearance as you? Also, your race shouldn't be common in the Scorpion Star Zone, right?" God King Evil Soul was truly panicking. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind as he tried his best to analyze Ji Tianqing's background and intentions. At this moment, he was truly terrified. He only wanted to leave and escape. However, he was severely injured, his divine power sealed, and Ji Tianqing had placed restrictions on his body. He couldn't move at all. Faced with Ji Tianqing's aggressive questioning, his mind was in a mess. He didn't know how to answer. He could only close his eyes and say in a low voice, "I don't know what you're talking about. Also, I don't have children. Everyone in the Scorpion Star Zone knows that I only have one adopted son, Marshal Lei Ming." Ji Tianqing wasn't in a hurry. He said with a smile, "You don't have children because you don't dare to have physical contact with others. You're afraid that your secret will be exposed. Oh right, I just thought of something else. Before you became a god, when you were still weak, your race's bloodline gave you great power, but it also brought you great pain. Every night when there was a full moon and stars shone brightly, you couldn't suppress the surging power in your body. Your body would swell, twist, and change shape. You were in so much pain that you wished you were dead. Only after you became a god and could absorb the power of the stars and divine power could you be free of that pain." Ji Tianqing's tone was neither fast nor slow. He was very confident and steady. God King Evil Soul's heart was trembling. He finally couldn't hold it in anymore and couldn't hide it anymore. "Who are you? How do you know all this?" Ji Tianqing smiled faintly and said, "Your race is known as the demons. It's a cruel, bloodthirsty, and cold-blooded race. It's also a race cursed by the heavens. Of course, you're now a God King expert. Therefore, you're not just a demon, you're also one of the best, a demon god." Chapter 39-43. When Ji Tianqing said this last sentence, Divine King Evil Soul's psychological line of defense was utterly crushed. He was unable to believe that Ji Tianqing understood the fiend race very well. Unlike the foreign race powerhouses in the various major star regions, they had never even heard of the fiend race, let alone understand. For over 10,000 years, Divine King Evil Soul did his best to conceal this fact, afraid that it would be discovered by anyone. The worry, terror, and anxiety in his heart caused his suspicious, cold-blooded, and emotionless nature. He did not dare to trust anyone, let alone reveal his secret. In order to not be noticed by others, he did not even dare to say the word fiend for so many years. But today, in front of Ji Tianqing, he was like a transparent person without any secrets. At this moment, he was filled with fear, his entire body powerless as he sprawled on the ground, panting violently. Divine King Evil Soul, don't you think we should have a good talk? Ji Tianqing looked down at him, the corners of his mouth curling into a hint of a cold smile. Oh right, almost forgot to tell you something. I was once called the Fiend Slayer by the world. The fiends that were slaughtered by me number as many as several million. Ji Tianqing's words were like a sharp blade, ruthlessly stabbing into Divine King Evil Soul's heart. Also like a sledgehammer, fiercely pounding on his divine soul. His eyes opened wide in anger, roaring in fury and shock. This is impossible. I spent over 3,000 years, searching through the 9 major star regions, and only found 10-odd fiend race bloodlines. The so-called fiend race, no one in this world knows about it anymore. I also collected and consulted countless ancient texts before finding some information about this race. How can you possibly know so much? How can you possibly slaughter several million fiends? How can there be so many fiend citizens for you to slaughter? Ji Tianqing was slightly pleasantly surprised, asking with a grin, oh. You already searched through the 9 major star regions and only found 10-odd fiends? When did this happen? Where are those 10-odd fiends now? Divine King Evil Soul answered weakly, just as you said, they were all cursed by heaven. When I found them, it was 10,000 years ago. But in the 2,000 years after that, they died one after another one. Right now, I'm probably the only demon left in this world. Pausing for a moment, he asked in a deep voice, where did you find millions of demons? Was it the dragon realm or the god realm? I've searched through all 9 major starfields, but the dragon realm and the god realm are the only ones I haven't visited yet. Ji Tianqing shook his head, and said, it's not the dragon realm, nor is it the god realm, but the lower realm. Slaughtering millions of demons was something I did before I ascended. Lower realm? God King Evil Soul was stunned. Remaining silent and pondering for a long while, he murmured to himself, millions of devil people, why are they in the lower world? Could it be that none of them can become gods and ascend to this place? Ji Tianqing said with an indifferent tone, the devil race in the lower realm is also cursed by the heavens. They are destined to be unable to become gods and ascend. Tell me, what clues have you found after investigating so many ancient books? Do you know the origin of the demon race? Do you know why the demon race was cursed by the heavens? Actually, Ji Tianqing vaguely knew a little. It should be related to the ancient Great War 30,000 years ago. For example, the mother of the human race, goddess Yaoguang, sacrificed herself in order to suppress the demon race. Even the 5 elements world was very likely destroyed during that period and fell into the lower realm. As for the origin of the demon race, as well as what role the demon race played in the ancient Great War, he was not very clear either. Therefore, that was why he would interrogate God King Evil Soul, hoping to add some clues. But very unfortunately, God King Evil Soul laughed coldly, full of pride, and said, ha 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 ha. Demon Slayer? You want to know the secret of our demon race? Right now, I'm the last demon in this world, you don't dare to kill me. If you kill me, you can forget about knowing the secret of the demon race. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to open his mouth to refute, he said again in a deep voice, don't use refining divine soul memories to threaten me. The clues and information that I can remember are just an extremely small portion. Many of the ancient books and clues that I found are all stored in some top secret place. As long as I die, you can forget about ever finding them. Ji Tianqing shot him a glance and said with a light laugh, hoo hoo. You suddenly found where your value lies and feel that your little life is saved. Don't forget, whether I kill you or not, it all depends on this king's mood. Even if this king doesn't kill you, there are also myriad ways to make you wish you were dead. God King Evil's soul was not afraid and was even somewhat disapproving as he said with a cold smile, "Hoo, as a fiend cursed by heaven, what kind of pain have I not tasted before? Still scared of your threats?" Ji Tianqing could not be bothered to bicker with him either and said in a calm tone, "Forget it, saying all this is useless nonsense. This king wants to investigate the origin of the demon race and some secrets. Don't you want to figure out these too? Relax, before finding the answer to the riddle, this king won't kill you. You just stay in the darkness obediently and calm down properly." Finished talking, he reached his hand out and fired out a ray of golden light again, knocking God King Evil's soul unconscious. Swoosh! He put God King Evil's soul away into the 9 heavens 10 absolute pagoda again and suppressed him in the 3rd level space. That level space was not big. There was only boundless darkness and a wasteland, cold and deathly still. After dealing with God King Evil's soul, Ji Tianqing continued casting spells to devour Ore stars. Half a month later, the Ore star gradually disappeared under his and the heaven-mending pearls devouring. Ji Tianqing obtained massive amounts of divine power, and his strength increased further. The heaven-mending pearl and 5 elements world also obtained boundless divine power replenishment. At present, the 5 elements world was currently experiencing a spiritual energy revival. It would probably continue for many years. And the heaven-mending pearl's power had also recovered to king-level superior-grade divine artifact long ago. Ji Tianqing put away the heaven-mending pearl and left contentedly, flying towards the firmament star not far away. Of course, he would not set up many traps on the firmament star. With God King Longwind's strength, as long as he was careful, he would definitely detect the abnormality and perceive the danger. Hence, after Ji Tianqing descended on the firmament star, he only surveyed the map and terrain of the star. He also chose 2 places to be the battlefield and buried some things in advance as a foreshadowing for the great battle. This move was not because he was afraid of God King Longwind and the 6 guards, but just in case. After Ji Tianqing finished setting up, only then could he ensure that nothing went wrong. Even if God King Longwind brought several thousand divine lords to attack, Ji Tianqing could also deal with it calmly. After setting up the battlefield, Ji Tianqing concealed himself on the firmament star and silently waited for God King Longwind's arrival. He maintained an invisible state and sat in a vast expanse of white cloud sea. He meditated in peace and paid attention to the movements in the void. Below the cloud sea was a steep mountain peak that was hundreds of thousands of feet tall and as straight as a giant sword. This was the first battlefield that Ji Tianqing chose. Unknowingly, another half a month passed. This evening, when the sun was setting in the west, the target finally appeared. Ji Tianqing also opened his eyes and ended his meditation. Chapter 39-44. Ji Tianqing sat at the peak of the Sea of Clouds as he sensed the abnormality in the starry sky. Kacha kacha. Following the crisp sound, a wide crack appeared in the sky. Firmament Star's space barrier was torn apart and a 3,000 feet long battleship which looked like a dragon eagle passed through the crack and entered Firmament Star. Although Ji Tianqing was 100,000 miles away from that battleship and he could not see the battleship's appearance clearly. But he could sense that the battleship was emitting a vigorous and majestic god power aura, like a huge beast which could split the heavens and earth as it barged into Firmament Star. That battleship's grade was very high, it was a king-grade upper-grade god artifact and there were many powerful god arrays inscribed on it. Generally speaking, only peak god kings would possess such a powerful battleship. Ji Tianqing was still worried that God King Chang Feng would be more cautious and sneak into Firmament Star silently. In that case, he would be in a passive position and it would be hard for him to find a chance to attack God King Chang Feng. But from the looks of it, God King Chang Feng had swaggered into Firmament Star, obviously looking down on him. This was not only because God King Chang Feng was confident in his ability, it was also because God King Evil Soul did not state Ji Tianqing's ability realm when he sent out the distress signal. In God King Chang Feng's understanding, he was merely a ninth stage realm foreign race God King who was causing trouble in Scorpio Star region. And God King Evil Soul's incompetence and failure to kill that foreign race God King was within his expectations. After all, he knew that God King Evil Soul harbored resentment and his ability was weaker. God King Chang Feng was not surprised by such a situation. Swoosh! In a blink of an eye, that Dragon Eagle battleship passed through the crack and entered Firmament Star. The battleship floated high in the sky and did not act rashly. At this moment, in the battleship's cockpit, there was a god race man dressed in golden armor with 4 golden wings on his back. He was looking down at Firmament Star expressionlessly. He had the typical characteristics of a god race man. He was over 10 feet tall and had a burly build. The 4 golden wings on his back were as tough and powerful as an eagle's wings with smooth lines. He had a head full of golden hair and his dark brown eyes revealed a cold and imposing aura. Without a doubt, this golden armor man was God King Chang Feng. A peak divine king expert from the divine world. Send a message to the evil soul deity king. Tell him that I have arrived at the Firmament Star. Tell him to report his location. God King Chang Feng placed his hands behind his back as he gave the order expressionlessly. Behind him, there were 6 high God Kings standing in the spacious room. Without exception, these 6 people were from God Realm's God Clan and their powers were around 7th and 8th stage realm. These 6 God Kings were the personal guards of God King Eternal Wind that God King Evil Soul had mentioned. They were also God King Eternal Wind's most trusted aides. One of them acknowledged the order and immediately took out a communication jade slip to send a message to Deity King Evil Soul. After sending the message, everyone fell silent, quietly waiting for the Evil Soul God King's reply. However, the Evil Soul God King was currently being suppressed by Ji Tianqing in the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and was still unconscious. That communication jade letter flew in front of Ji Tianqing, but was unable to enter the Divine Pagoda, so Evil Soul Divine King was naturally unable to receive it. God King Chang Feng waited for around a quarter of an hour and didn't see any reply from Evil Soul God King, so he started to get anxious. This incompetent bastard. Didn't he say that he was hiding in the Firmament Star to recuperate? Why hasn't he replied to my message till now? He can't even handle such a small matter and even made me take action personally. After this matter is over, I will definitely cripple him. This incompetent and disobedient fellow has no right to be the domain lord. Evidently, God King Chang Feng was extremely dissatisfied with Evil Soul God King's performance and already had the intention to support him to be the domain lord. The 6 God King realm guards all nodded their heads to express their agreement. My lord is right. Many years ago, this subordinate could tell that Evil Soul God King had ulterior motives and harbored resentment towards my lord. What my lord needs is an obedient puppet, not an incompetent but ambitious piece of trash. My lord, this subordinate thinks that Evil Soul God King's foster son Lei Ming might be a good candidate. This lad's ability is not inferior to Evil Soul God King, but he is easier to tame and control. Just as the few guards were remonstrating, God King Chang Feng suddenly frowned as a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Head forward and rush to that mountain. God King Chang Feng pointed to the vast sea of clouds below as he looked at the faintly discernible mountain peak in the sea of clouds. The 6 guards did not understand the meaning, but the God King controlling the divine warship still carried out the order without hesitation. After the divine warship rushed to that mountain peak at lightning speed, God King Chang Feng opened his mouth and said, "Just now, I saw a flash of blood light on that mountain peak. That's a special light and energy fluctuation that would only appear when Evil Soul God King cast a divine art. He should be on that mountain peak, but I wonder what he's up to." God King Chang Feng also knew that Evil Soul God King's divine art and divine power were very special and had very obvious signs. Therefore, he only needed a glance at the blood light that flashed across the sea of clouds and sensed a wisp of divine power fluctuation to ascertain that it was Evil Soul God King casting a divine art. The few guards were not as confident as him and were somewhat worried as they all opened their mouths to warn him. "Your Excellency, please be careful and be wary of any tricks." "Your Excellency, could it be that Evil Soul God King was attacked by foreign race experts and they are currently fighting there? What if Evil Soul God King betrays us and sets a trap there to ambush us?" These 6 people were not only God King Changfeng's guards but also his strategists and think tanks. They naturally considered things more comprehensively. However, God King Changfeng did not take it to heart at all as he sneered contemptuously, "I believe that Evil Soul God King has the thoughts and guts to betray us, but he doesn't have the strength. Ignoring the fact that he ambushes me, even if he joins forces with foreign race experts to set up an ambush, it's also courting death. If he really dares to betray us, then I don't even need to find an excuse. I'll just cripple him." As they conversed, the divine warship traversed hundreds of thousands of miles of sea of clouds and arrived at the brown mountain peak. This mountain peak hidden in the sea of clouds was hundreds of thousands of feet tall and spanned 1,000 miles. The mountain peak's terrain was relatively flat and spanned dozens of miles like a massive platform. The divine warship floated above the platform. God King Changfeng led the 6 God King guards out of the divine warship. Swoosh! 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 7 people appeared in the sky. The 6 guards immediately drew their swords and sabers and spread out, surveying the surrounding situation vigilantly. God King Changfeng's hands were empty as he stood proudly above the sea of clouds. Looking at the empty mountain peak, he frowned. It was only to see that the mountain peak was completely silent. There was not even a shadow. Forget about any traps or ambushes, even Evil Soul God King was nowhere to be seen. God King Changfeng's brows were locked tightly as he released his divine sense to extend into the surroundings to investigate the situation inside the mountain peak. The 6 guards became increasingly vigilant. Someone warned with a voice transmission, "Your Excellency, the situation is somewhat strange. We have to be careful." Before this person finished speaking, a golden light that soared into the sky suddenly lit up in the sea of clouds around the mountain peak. Chapter 39:45. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. In an instant, the boundless golden light that soared into the sky formed a light screen above the sea of clouds. In just a breath's time, this golden light screen with a radius of 10,000 miles was formed, sealing off the sea of clouds and the entire mountain peak. Naturally, Divine King Changfeng and the 6 guards, as well as their battleship, were also sealed within the light screen. The light screen was a huge divine array that flickered with resplendent divine light, releasing a divine power that could suppress heaven and earth, enveloping Divine King Changfeng and the rest. Divine King Changfeng was still alright as he was not affected much. However, the 6 high-level Divine Kings clearly felt that their breathing was not smooth as they found it difficult to move. The circulation of their divine power also became sluggish. Faced with this sudden situation, the 6 Divine Kings were shocked as they hurriedly transmitted their voices, "Everyone, be careful. There is indeed an ambush here. Protect the Lord, be on full alert." The 6 Divine Kings adopted a stance as though they were facing a great enemy. However, Divine King Changfeng's expression was indifferent and extremely calm. He looked at the empty mountain peak and said loudly, "Evil Soul, you are really bold to set up a trap here to ambush this seat. Ha 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 ha, after not seeing you for 100 years, not only have your guts increased greatly, you are even indulging in wild fantasies, wishful thinking. Just based on your strength and methods, no matter how you scheme, you will not be able to shake this seat. Scram out and accept your death." Although Divine King Changfeng's divine senses were still searching for where Divine King Evil Soul was hiding. But he was not worried in the slightest and was not afraid of Divine King Evil Soul's schemes. In his opinion, even if Divine King Evil Soul gathered many Divine Kings to ambush here, they would not be able to do anything to him. After all, he was a peak divine king and held a king-grade top-grade divine artifact in his hands. Facing all the divine kings in Scorpio Star region, he was in an invincible position. Right at this moment, on the right rear of the mountain peak, behind an 8th stage realm divine king guard, a dot of cold light suddenly lit up. Swish! That's right, that was just a dot of cold white light. It was only the size of a little finger and it suddenly appeared in the sky. However, the cold light instantly traversed a distance of 1,000 feet and pierced towards that divine king guard's chest. Bam! With a muffled sound, the 8th God King's guard was pierced through the heart before he could even resist or dodge. Golden divine blood splattered in front of him, sprinkling into the sea of clouds. His body stiffened, and he still maintained a vigilant and alert posture, but he was stunned on the spot and was unable to move. There was no doubt that his internal organs and veins were crushed by that cold light. His god body died on the spot. Swish! A golden, diamond-shaped godhood flew out from the top of his head. The God King's guard fell from the sky, into the sea of clouds. His godhead was at a loss, and it subconsciously fled into the distance, trying to get as far away from this mountain as possible. As for Divine King Changfeng and the other 5 guards, their faces were filled with shock and astonishment as they cried out in alarm. The 5 guards had no idea who had ambushed their comrade and destroyed his divine body in an instant. Only Divine King Changfeng could tell that the blazing white light was actually a sword beam. Only peak divine kings proficient in sword Dao could possess such horrifying lethality. That was right. Only peak divine kings could do it. It was impossible for a 9th stage realm god king like Divine King Evil Soul to accomplish it. After the cold light disappeared, the surroundings were still silent. No one appeared. But the 5 God King's guards were shrouded in rage and fear. They did not dare to disperse, and they all closed in on Divine King Changfeng, gathering around him. Who is it? To be so despicable, to ambush us secretly. Sneaky bastard, come out if you have the guts and fight us face to face. Divine King Evil Soul, you damned beast, we're going to grind your bones to dust. The 5 guards roared and cursed furiously. Divine King Changfeng remained silent, but his expression was extremely grim. His eyes shone with a cold light. He understood that things were not that simple. This trap was designed by a peak divine king. The real killing move was probably still behind. However, what Divine King Changfeng was worried about did not happen. Other than the golden light grand array's power continuing to increasing the pressure on the 5 God King's guards, there was no follow-up attack. This was also because the 5 guards surrounded Divine King Changfeng, guarding the surroundings with extreme vigilance. Even a heaven-class assassin like Ji Tianqing could not find a chance to strike. Therefore, he appeared on the mountain peak that was shrouded in clouds. Swoosh! A white light flickered, and a dragon race youth in white robes appeared on the mountain peak, looking at everyone expressionlessly. Instantly, Divine King Changfeng and the 5 guards' attention was attracted by him. You're the one who ambushed us. Damned bastard, you're not from Scorpio Star region, you're from the dragon race. I understand now, you're the foreign race's divine king that Evil Soul mentioned. Despicable and shameless beast, Divine King Evil Soul betrayed us, and you actually joined forces with him to ambush us. The 5 guards were knowledgeable, and in a blink of an eye, they recognized Ji Tianqing's identity and background, and guessed that he was in cahoots with Divine King Evil Soul. Divine King Changfeng looked indifferent, but he was extremely vigilant. He stared at Ji Tianqing silently. After sizing him up for a moment, he made a judgment in his heart. Indeed of the dragon race, peak Divine King strength. Looks like your strength realm is on par with mine, but your strength foundation is a little weaker. No wonder Divine King Evil Soul and the Divine Kings under his command were all defeated. Based on their strength and methods, they can't deal with a peak Divine King. Seeing Ji Tianqing's background clearly, Divine King Changfeng was much calmer in his heart and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, there was only the other party here and no one else. Just a peak Divine King, then it was easy to handle. Divine King Changfeng regained his dignity and confidence. Staring at Ji Tianqing, he said with a cold smile, "Brat, if this seat didn't guess wrongly, you defeated Divine King Evil Soul and captured him." Divine King Evil Soul craved for life and was afraid of death, so under your coercion, he sent a message to this seat for help. It's just that this seat doesn't understand, where did your confidence come from, to actually dare to set up a trap here and ambush this seat? Divine King Changfeng was not in a hurry to kill the other party. He wanted to sound out the other party's background first, whether or not he still had any backup moves or other helpers. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianqing said with a contemptuous look, "Dealing with the few of you, this king alone is enough. This heavenly scorpion star region, this king wants it. You all can go and die already." Finished talking, he actually did not give Divine King Changfeng the chance to probe again, directly brandishing his sword and charging over. Swoosh! 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 His left hand executed the Dragon Elephant Divine Fist, while his right hand executed the Shattering Sun Sword, taking the initiative to attack Divine King Changfeng and the 5 guards. Divine King Changfeng gave a contemptuous smile. He did not even take out his weapon and was about to swing his fist to meet the attack. The 5 guards were also filled with righteous indignation, brandishing their sabers and swords with all their might, using their ultimate divine abilities and launching a counterattack. Soon, a dazzling divine light illuminated a radius of 20,000 miles. Both parties were about to unleash a ferocious clash and kill immediately. But right at this time, something that everyone did not expect happened. 3,000 miles behind them, 3 identical Ji Tianqing appeared out of thin air, brandishing their swords at the same time, slashing towards that divine ship. Chapter 39-46. The attention of God King Changfeng and the 5 guards was focused on the Ji Tianqing on the mountain peak. They never expected that there would be 3 Ji Tianqing a few thousand kilometers behind them. Not only were their appearances and auras identical, even their strength, cultivation realm, and divine soul auras were identical. At this moment, God King Changfeng and the 5 guards turned pale with fright as they revealed expressions of deep indignation. These are his clones. Quick, protect the divine worship. You damned bastard, you're too despicable. Everyone cursed angrily as their hearts leaped to their throats. Unfortunately, everything happened in an instant. It was too late for them to stop it. Bam! 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 The sky was filled with divine arts as they collided, producing a series of dull thuds. The divine arts executed by number 1 Ji Tianqing were all neutralized by God King Changfeng and the 5 guards. Neither side gained the upper hand. At the same time, the other 3 Ji Tianqing had already brandished their swords and executed arts, ruthlessly cleaving the gigantic divine worship. Boom! Amidst a deafening boom, the divine worship floating in the sky was drowned by sword light and divine arts. The divine power barrier on the surface of the divine worship was shattered on the spot as countless fragments of light splattered. The incomparably hard outer shell of the divine worship was also cleaved by the burial of heaven, creating a 1,000-foot-long gash as countless fragments splattered out. Without a doubt, these 3 Ji Tianqing were not all clones. 2 of them were clones while 1 was Ji Tianqing's main body. It was also Ji Tianqing's main body that used the burial of heaven to cleave the divine worship apart. Whoosh! Hundreds of gods of outsider races fell out of the wide opening like dumplings being dropped into a pot. There were also countless divine stones, ores, pills, and divine artifacts that poured down like floodwaters, scattering into the vast sea of clouds. These foreign race gods came from different stellar domains and were divided into different races. They were all at the heavenly god realm, but they were sealed and unable to use their divine power. They were no different from mortals. As for the cultivation resources, they were of a lower grade and were of a variety of types. They seem to have been plundered from the various star fields. The reason why Ji Tianqing had ambushed the divine worship was because he was worried that there would be a large number of experts hidden in the divine worship. However, he did not expect that God King Changfeng's divine ship would actually contain tens of thousands of foreign race heavenly gods and countless cultivation resources. He then recalled that God King Changfeng was working for a certain God Emperor, and that the 5 great God Emperors were carrying out some unknown plan in the depths of the void. Therefore, he guessed that these things were all plundered by God King Changfeng in preparation to gift to that God Emperor. In the blink of an eye, God King Changfeng and the 5 guards reacted. They no longer cared about Ji Tianqing's avatar and pounced towards the divine worship without regard for anything else, wanting to protect the resources and the foreign race gods in the divine worship. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone rushed over, Ji Tianqing brandished the burial of heaven again and slashed out several thousand feet long sword lights, cleaving at the gash in the divine worship. At the same time, 6 avatars appeared out of thin air in the sky. A total of 9 avatars joined forces to intercept God King Changfeng and the 5 guards. The 6 of them were blocked and surrounded by the 9 avatars, unable to break through. After all, Ji Tianqing's 9 avatars each had half his strength. Strictly speaking, the combat strength of each avatar was on par with God King Changfeng. Of course, this was under the condition that God King Changfeng did not use a supreme-grade divine artifact. Bam! 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 Divine light splattered all over the sky as deafening booms exploded one after another. God King Changfeng and the 5 guards were blocked. Even if they risked their lives to break through, it was to no avail. They could only watch helplessly as Ji Tianqing's main body continuously brandished his sword, chopping that divine worship into pieces, breaking it into 3 pieces. Ah! Save me! The shattered remains of the divine worship fell from high in the sky, smashing into the vast sea of clouds. Among them, divine stones, metals, weapons, and other resources sprayed out all over the sky. It even flung out countless foreign race celestial gods. They were like disorderly fragments, spiraling high in the sky before falling into the sea of clouds. Of course, there were also 100 high-ranked divine lords in the divine worship. They were God King Changfeng's guards. When the divine worship was attacked, they also rose up to resist and retaliate. But their resistance was so weak that it was not worth mentioning compared to Ji Tianqing's ferocious attacks. After the divine worship was shattered, they also fled the divine worship one after another, scattering high in the sky. Ji Tianqing was simple and crude. Brandishing his sword, he pointed it at the firmament and roared furiously, "Sword rain!" Immediately, tens of thousands of starry swords appeared in the firmament, pouring down like a meteor shower. With the 100,000 feet tall mountain as the center, a radius of 20,000 miles was covered by the starry swords. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The earth-shaking loud noise lasted for a long time before dissipating. Under the bombardment of the tens of thousands of starry swords, the 100,000 feet tall mountain was leveled to the ground, turning into dust and dirt that filled the sky. The resources and more than 30,000 foreign race celestial gods that poured out of the divine worship were also blasted into dregs by the starry swords. Even those 100 high-ranked divine lords could not escape the fate of being pulverized into smithereens. In fact, the 5 high-ranked divine king guards were also injured by Ji Tianqing's clones. Blasted by the sky full of swords, their divine bodies were destroyed one after another. About 100 breaths of time later, the clamorous battlefield gradually calmed down. God King Changfeng's worship was destroyed. The divine lord guards were also completely wiped out. Even 3 of those 5 divine king realm guards were killed. Even their divine sparks turned into fragments. The remaining 2 divine sparks, in addition to the initial divine spark, all fled in front of God King Changfeng and burrowed into his sleeves. They could not escape the sealing grand array and could only hide by God King Changfeng's side. It was the safest. On the battlefield, only Ji Tianqing and God King Changfeng were left. No, there were still Ji Tianqing's 9 clones. Counting it this way, there should be 10 Ji Tianqing surrounding God King Changfeng. The atmosphere was very solemn and austere. God King Changfeng's expression and eyes were as cold as ice, filled with venomous resentment. "Punk, who the hell are you? Why do you want to oppose this seat?" God King Changfeng's plan was foiled and he suffered heavy losses. He knew that it was hard to end well today. He was definitely going to suffer this loss. However, he had a supreme-grade king-level divine artifact and reckoned that escaping was not difficult. But before he escaped, he had to figure out the other party's background so that he could take revenge in the future. This king has said it long ago. This king wants to control the Scorpio star zone. Since you want to snatch territory, then this king will kill you. Ji Tianqing held the sword of burial of heaven in a reverse grip and looked at God King Changfeng expressionlessly, replying in an indifferent tone. Humph. God King Changfeng naturally did not believe such nonsense. He insisted that Ji Tianqing definitely had other schemes. This king has some understanding of the Dragon Realm situation. But according to what this king knows, there is no such person like you among the 5 great dragon emperors of the Dragon Realm. Speak, who the hell are you? Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a faint smile and said, given your status, you are not qualified to know. Don't waste time. Wait until this king captures you, then we can chat slowly. Chapter 39-47. Ji Tianqing's words made Divine King Longwind even more certain that he absolutely had other motives. Divine King Longwind was very vigilant, his mentality also having a huge change. When he came to Firmament Planet, he did not take Divine King Evil Soul and Ji Tianqing seriously at all. But at this time, the supplies he was in charge of transporting were destroyed, and the guards under his command were also all killed. Even he was in a desperate situation and was very likely to be killed by Ji Tianqing. At this time, there was only one thought in his mind. This seat must escape, I absolutely cannot die here. Something must have happened in the Dragon Realm, something abnormal happened. It's very likely a plan targeting His Excellency the God Emperor. This seat must spread this news and let His Excellency the God Emperor be on guard. Seeing Ji Tianqing and the 9 avatars closing in continuously, the pressure on Divine King Longwind grew greater and greater. He no longer hesitated and hurriedly took out his trump card, a supreme-grade king-grade divine artifact Warhammer. This Warhammer was blackish-purple in color, with a handle more than 10 feet long. The Warhammer, which was as thick as a water bucket, had sharp cones on both ends. The Warhammer's surface was engraved with mysterious array patterns, and it even had dazzling lightning coiling around it. This was a divine hammer that had more than 40,000 years of history, originating from the ancient era. Divine King Longwind held the divine hammer in his hand, staring coldly at Ji Tianqing's main body. Berserk divine power accumulated all over his body, ready to erupt at any time. From the looks of it, he seemed to have locked onto Ji Tianqing's main body and was prepared to fight to the death. But in reality, he was secretly observing those 9 avatars, looking for a breakthrough. Even with a supreme-grade king-grade divine artifact, he did not plan on fighting to the death with Ji Tianqing. Instead, he was looking for an opportunity to escape. Buzz. 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 As Divine King Longwind poured divine power into the Warhammer flashed with blue, purple, and gold lightning. Bastard, die. Divine King Longwind suddenly roared, holding the divine hammer with both hands, smashing it ruthlessly at Ji Tianqing's main body. Immediately, the divine hammer released hundreds of lightning pillars, like a torrential flood, wanting to drown Ji Tianqing's main body. This move was not a feint. He had indeed used all of his power. God King Changfeng thought to himself that there was no way that high-grade king-tier black sword could withstand this strike. The other party would definitely retreat and hide. At this time, he would attack one of the doppelgangers on the left rear and forcefully break through the encirclement. However, to God King Longwind's surprise, Ji Tianqing actually did not dodge or retreat. His entire body lit up with golden light, turning into a hazy golden shield to protect himself. Humph. You want to block my divine hammer with just your divine shield? God King Changfeng sneered in his heart. He had already predicted that Ji Tianqing would be sent flying, so he turned to attack the avatar behind him. However, the scene that unfolded before his eyes caused his eyes to widen as dense shock gushed out from his heart. Boom! More than 300 thunderbolts hit Ji Tianqing hard and knocked Ji Tianqing back tens of thousands of meters. However, the golden shield on the surface of his body did not shatter. Only a few cracks appeared. He was also unscathed. Even the circulation of his divine power was not affected. He immediately brandished his sword to launch a counterattack. Sword shattering the 9 heavens. Ji Tianqing brandished his sword and stabbed out a 10,000-foot sword beam. It was like a blazing golden sun as it charged towards God King Changfeng. At the same time, the 9 doppelgangers also each executed different sword moves, joining forces to attack God King Changfeng. God King Changfeng was shocked and instantly understood the reason. He indeed has a supreme-grade king-tier divine artifact. Furthermore, it's a protective divine artifact. No wonder I did not injure him. This result made God King Changfeng's heart turn cold as he felt more and more despair. His greatest reliance was the supreme-grade divine artifact. Since the other party had won too, then it was basically impossible for him to win. It would even be difficult for him to escape today. However, the situation was critical and did not allow him to think too much. The sword lights that Ji Tianqing and the 9 doppelgangers slashed over had already descended from the sky, enveloping his body. At the critical moment, God King Changfeng could only raise his divine hammer and release tens of thousands of lightning bolts, forming a shield to protect himself. Boom! 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 A series of dull thuds exploded, reverberating between heaven and earth. The colorful lightning shield was blasted into smithereens, splattering countless fragments. Although God King Changfeng was not injured and blocked all the attacks with the divine hammer's power, his face turned pale. However, he was shaken until his face was deathly pale, and his divine power was in turmoil. Even the divine hammer was flashing with lightning, its energy fluctuations somewhat chaotic. God King Changfeng hurriedly regulated his divine power while searching for an opening. However, Ji Tianqing and the 9 doppelgangers seemed to not know exhaustion as they executed earth-shattering sword Dao divine abilities to besiege him. What was even more ridiculous was that Ji Tianqing and the 4 doppelgangers attacked together, executing different divine abilities. As for the other 5 doppelgangers, they were accumulating power to execute other divine abilities. God King Changfeng had just blocked the first wave of attacks and did not even have time to catch his breath before he welcomed the second wave. He managed to resolve the second wave of attacks with great difficulty, but the third wave arrived. Just like that, Ji Tianqing and the 9 doppelgangers took turns attacking, beating God King Changfeng until he was forced to defend. Although God King Changfeng could still use his divine hammer to block for a short period of time, his divine power was greatly depleted. His divine soul aura became more and more chaotic, and his openings also became more and more numerous. After both sides fought for more than a dozen rounds, Ji Tianqing caught his opening and chopped off his left leg. From the knee down, his entire calf was severed, splattering a large amount of blood. God King Changfeng let out a painful groan, his face turning increasingly pale. However, the besiegement did not stop. He did not have time to catch his breath, nor was he able to treat his injuries. He could only take the beating. Boom. 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 11 figures flickered high in the sky, leaping like rabbits and swooping like hawks. The colorful brilliance of the divine spells intertwined in the sky, making the sky dazzling. Deafening booms spread across a radius of tens of thousands of miles, shaking the ground until it shook. Unknowingly, another 15 minutes passed. God King Changfeng's strength became weaker and weaker, and his injuries became more and more severe. His entire body was covered in wounds and bloody scars. Even 3 of the golden wings on his back were chopped off, leaving only a single sapling. He looked rather wretched. Now that things had come to this, God King Changfeng knew that he could not extricate himself and was in complete despair. However, he was a peak God King, and had once ruled over a continent in the divine world on behalf of the God Emperor. How could an expert of this level possibly open his mouth to beg for mercy? He could only pray in his heart that the God Emperor could avenge him after he died in battle. In fact, in the not-too-distant future, if the God Emperor could complete that plan, he might even be able to defy the heavens and change his fate, allowing him to be revived. With such thoughts in mind, God King Changfeng unleashed the last of his strength and frenzy in the desperate situation, fighting back with all his might. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing and the 9 doppelgangers advanced and retreated with a clear division of labor, not messy in the slightest. Even until now, he and his doppelgangers had conserved their strength and were not in a hurry to succeed. As such, even if God King Changfeng unleashed his potential and fought with all his might, he could not break out of the encirclement. Chapter 39-48 Sword of Apocalypse. 30 minutes later, the battle came to an end. Ji Tianqing caught hold of Divine King Changfeng's weakness and used his strongest killing move. The boundless power of the world condensed into a 1,000-foot-long golden sword that slashed at the extremely weak God King Changfeng. Boom! Crack! Amidst a deafening explosion, Divine King Changfeng was smashed into pieces by the gigantic sword. His divine body shattered like a porcelain vase as countless fragments flew everywhere. There was also a diamond-shaped dark golden godhead among the pieces of flesh that filled the air. The divine core was empty and cracks appeared on its surface. Clearly, it was also severely injured. At that moment, not only was Divine King Changfeng's body destroyed, his consciousness was also in a coma and his divine core fell from the sky. The battle ended just like that. Ji Tianqing recalled his 9 clones and put away the sword of burial of heaven. He waved his hand and shot out a beam of golden light that captured Divine King Changfeng's divine core. The dark gold divine core was the size of a walnut. There were thousands of divine patterns on its surface and it contained more than 980 laws. Ji Tianqing observed it in his hands. After confirming that Divine King Changfeng would not wake up anytime soon, he kept it in his interspatial ring. He actually grasped more than 980 laws. His strength and foundation are so dense that he's almost catching up to me in my previous life. He muttered to himself as a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. After keeping Divine King Changfeng's divine core, he shot out another beam of golden light that enveloped the blackish-purple divine hammer. Divine King Changfeng was not dead. He merely fell into a coma. Therefore, the divine hammer still had an owner. However, it did not nurture a weapon soul and did not have its own consciousness. After Divine King Changfeng fainted, the divine hammer floated high in the sky and shone with 5-colored lightning. Ji Tianqing picked up the divine hammer and looked at it over and over again before putting it into his spatial ring. At that moment, he had already made a decision. No matter what, he had to kill Divine King Changfeng. That was because he wanted to snatch Divine King Changfeng's divine hammer and refine his divine core. Strictly speaking, this was the first peak divine king he killed in his life. Just Divine King Changfeng's divine spark and divine hammer were a shocking fortune, a harvest that made one excited. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out several beams of divine light, dispelling the sealing array within a radius of 20,000 miles. More than 60 beams of divine light flew out of the ground that had long turned into ruins and returned to him. Those were more than 60 king-level medium and high-level divine artifacts. He had arranged them in the surroundings in advance to serve as the foundation of the formation and enhance the power of the sealing formation. After doing all this, Ji Tianqing began to clean up the battlefield and collect the spoils. His spoils of war far exceeded Divine King Changfeng's Divine Core and Divine King Changfeng's Divine King. There were also the 6 high-level Divine King Guards. Their godheads, divine weapons, and spatial rings were also a great fortune. Of course, there were also countless Divine King Changfeng's. Although the quality of those resources was low, there were many of them. They were scattered on the ground in a radius of 30,000 miles, piling up into small mountains. Of Changfeng, heavens. Of end. Calm. Of Changfeng's naturally, he was not interested in these Divine King Changfeng's low-grade cultivation resources. He gave them all to the heaven-mending bead to replenish his 5 elements world's divine power. After cleaning up the spoils, Ji Tianqing landed near the battleship's wreckage. The 10,000 zhonglong battleship had already broken into pieces and sunk into the ruins. Ji Tianqing used his divine perception to investigate carefully. He found a few trillion worth of resources from the battleship's wreckage, as well as some miscellaneous items. Those miscellaneous items included tokens with special symbols engraved on them, special communication jade slips, and some gold leaf books that recorded information. Ji Tianqing believed that these tokens, jade slips, and golden books might record some clues. He had to take some time to study them. After doing all this and making sure he did not miss anything, he flew up and left Firmament Star. 3 days later. In the void not far from Flying Deer Star, the burial of Heaven's sword merged with the pitch-black void and was steadily advancing. In the Sword World, the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda was hidden in peaceful Soil City. Ji Tianqing was in the distorted spacetime of the Divine Pagoda, circulating his energy to refine God King Changfeng's godhead. Before this, he had already counted the spoils of war and his gains. God King Changfeng's divine battleship was filled with Divine King Changfeng's cultivation resources, worth more than 50 trillion. However, Ji Tianqing did not refine them. They were all devoured by the heaven-mending bead to replenish his 5 elements world's energy. His gains were the godheads of God King Changfeng and the 6 high-ranking God Kings, as well as the divine hammer. In addition, the interspatial rings of the 7 experts also contained vast amounts of cultivation resources. There were king-grade divine artifacts, king-grade divine pills, materials for refining artifacts and pills, as well as countless divine stones, gems, and other strange treasures. The value was not easy to estimate, but Ji Tianqing estimated that it was more than 50 trillion. Originally, God King Changfeng was only unconscious and not dead. However, Ji Tianqing did not plan on interrogating him. It was too troublesome. If God King Changfeng was afraid of death and confessed, then it would be inappropriate for him to kill God King Changfeng. Therefore, he directly crushed God King Changfeng's godhead and refined its godhead fragments. If he wanted to know any information or secrets, he only needed to refine God King Changfeng's divine soul memories and everything would be clear. Time passed silently. After the burial of Heaven's sword passed by Flying Deer Star, it headed straight for Faraway Star. It did not encounter any more obstructions along the way. Unknowingly, half a month passed in the void. Ji Tianqing also spent more than 2 years refining in the distorted spacetime. God King Changfeng's godhead fragments were completely refined by him. This was the highest grade godhead he had refined so far. The time he spent was also very long. He absorbed dozens of divine Tao laws from God King Changfeng's godhead, as well as vast amounts of divine power. Currently, his strength was steadily approaching the mid-stage of the 9th-level God-King realm. The number of divine Tao laws he had grasped had also reached 960. He even refined God King Changfeng's divine soul memories and obtained the information and secrets that he wanted to know. Just as he guessed, God King Changfeng's backer, that so-called sovereign, was precisely a God Emperor of the God world. The 9 Suns God Emperor who controlled Universe Continent, Lu Jiuyang. As early as 1,000 years ago, God King Changfeng was still just a 7th-stage realm God King. At that time, he was serving under Lu Jiuyang's command. It was just that his status was not high and his authority was not considered great either. Later, 5 great God Emperors besieged Kenshin in the void. Several 9th and 8th level God Kings under Lu Jiuyang's command were all killed by Kenshin. Ever since then, God King Changfeng was placed in an important position and promoted. After Lu Jiuyang broke through to the God Emperor realm, he gave God King Changfeng a lot of care and guidance. Hence, God King Changfeng's strength advanced by leaps and bounds, becoming a peak God King 500 years ago. It was also from that time that he left the God world and headed to the depths of the void to run errands for Lu Jiuyang. In these 500 years, he became Lu Jiuyang's spokesperson, controlling the heavenly sun star region which had long been conquered by Lu Jiuyang. At the same time, he also had to help Lu Jiuyang expand his territory, seizing the last piece of land without an owner, Scorpio Star region. Chapter 39-49. God King Changfeng had been too busy for the past 500 years. Apart from a few times when he went into secluded cultivation, he spent the rest of his time in the void. Not only did he have to command the domain lords of the Tianyang star zone, but he also had to gather countless heavenly gods. He also had to transport cultivation resources and foreign heavenly gods to the deepest part of the void and hand them over to the God Emperor 9 Suns. In addition, he had to make a trip to the Scorpio star zone every few decades to 100 years to urge God King Evil Soul to conquer the entire star zone as soon as possible. In addition, the billions of citizens of the heaven and earth continent of the God world were enslaved to excavate and extract resources day and night. Every few decades, God King Changfeng had to make a trip back to the God world to personally transport cultivation resources. Through Divine King Changfeng's memories, Ji Tianqing understood many things after understanding these past events. First, Lu Jiuyang was also in the depths of the void, carrying out some kind of plan around the foggy star. This kind of unknown plan required a huge amount of cultivation resources and even a large number of foreign heavenly gods. Second, Lu Jiuyang had instructed God King Changfeng to unify the Scorpio star zone as soon as possible in order to open up a third resource land. Once God King Changfeng took control of the star zone, he would have God King Evil Soul's search for resources at all costs. In addition, Ji Tianqing learned from godly King Changfeng's memories that other than Lu Jiuyang, the other godly emperors were also in the depths of the void. They were busy researching the mysterious gray fog enigma. The god emperors seemed to have reached some kind of agreement and had been working together to cast spells without rest for several hundred years. Therefore, they were unable to escape and leave the enigma of the gray fog. All kinds of orders and affairs were handed over to their trusted subordinates to manage and pass on. When Ji Tianqing learned of this secret, he couldn't help but frown and mutter to himself. Other than Lu Jiuyang, which other god emperors are there? Are all 5 god emperors in the depths of the void, or are there only 3 or 4? What exactly is the mystery of the gray fog? Why are the god emperors so focused on researching it without regard to the cost? The last question was what Ji Tianqing wanted to know the most. Unfortunately, the god emperors were all tight-lipped about the mystery of the gray mist and refused to divulge it. People like God King Eternal Wind, who were running errands for the various god emperors, did not dare to casually ask around. Otherwise, if they angered any god emperor, their lives would be in danger. Because they all understood that to the god emperor, the mystery of the gray fog was more important than their lives. For the sake of researching the mystery of the Grey Mist, the god emperors did not care about the territories of the god realm or the planetary regions they occupied. Apart from the clues and information Ji Tianqing had obtained, there were many other bits and pieces of information. That information included information about the God Realm, the Qianquan continent, the Tianyang star zone, and some information about the enigmatic Grey Fog. Other than that, Ji Tianqing still had no clue about the few secrets that he wanted to know the most. He was a little disappointed, but after adjusting his emotions, he continued to refine the godheads of the 6 God King guards. Although the godheads of those guards could not be compared to God King Eternal Winds, they were still 7 God Kings. However, they were 7th and 8th heaven God Kings after all. Not only did they possess immense divine power, but they had also grasped more than 600 divine Tao laws. Ji Tianqing spent another 2 years refining in the distorted spacetime before finally devouring all 6 godhead fragments. After the refinement was completed, his strength increased a little, and he also absorbed 20 laws. Now, he had grasped as many as 980 divine Tao laws. Just 20 more divine Tao laws and he would break through 1,000. Once the number of laws broke through 1,000, it would be a qualitative leap. Ji Tianqing was looking forward to it. Calculating the time, a month has already passed in the outside world. Blue Scorpion God King still hasn't sent me a message, so I don't know how the situation is. That crafty guy, he couldn't have forgotten his oath to the heavenly Tao and wants to hide and play dead, right? Ji Tianqing paused his cultivation, left the distorted spacetime, and sent a message to Blue Scorpion God King. Before long, he received Blue Scorpion God King's reply. And Blue Scorpion God King's reaction was precisely within his expectations. Your Excellency, please calm your anger. This subordinate didn't report news to you this month not because this subordinate was negligent. It's just that this subordinate didn't dare to disturb you, afraid of delaying your time. Rest assured, Your Excellency, this subordinate is loyal and devoted to you and absolutely has no disloyalty. In this 1 month, this subordinate gathered the various troops and is currently fighting a great battle at the front lines, fighting a bloody battle with the enemy troops. This subordinate released the news of Divine King Evil's soul being killed. The officers and soldiers under his command were thrown into disarray, their morale low. However, Divine King Evil's soul is dead. There's still Marshal Thundercry holding down the fort in Distant Star, commanding them through messages. Therefore, the troops under Divine King Evil Soul's command didn't fall into disarray and are still resisting with all their might. This subordinate didn't dare to advance rashly and led the officers and soldiers to fight steadily and surely. In this 1 month, we've already recovered 9 stars. Blue Scorpion God King's reply first apologized to Ji Tianqing, explaining why he did not send news for a month. Following that, he reported the battle results, as well as the following battle plan. But what interested Ji Tianqing and made him reveal a trace of a cold smile was Blue Scorpion God King's last sentence. This subordinate inquired that Divine King Evil Soul's backer, Divine King Longwind, has already returned to the Scorpio star domain. But we couldn't find any traces of him. Your Excellency, please be on your guard. On the surface, Blue Scorpion God King was concerned about Ji Tianqing's safety, afraid that he would be ambushed and killed by Divine King Longwind. But in reality, this was the problem that Blue Scorpion God King was most concerned about. This indicated that his so-called fighting steadily and surely, not daring to advance rashly, was actually because he was afraid of Divine King Longwind. He dared to fight with Divine King Evil Soul because Evil Soul was not a peak Divine King. But when he faced Divine King Longwind, there was only death. Therefore, he did not dare to counterattack too fiercely, so as to avoid provoking Divine King Longwind's ambush. Ji Tianqing saw through Blue Scorpion God King's thoughts and could not help sneering in his heart, I'm not interested in the position of Domain Lord. It's just that I don't want the 9 young God Emperors' scheme to succeed. That's why I supported Blue Scorpion God King to be a puppet Domain Lord. Otherwise, based on these thoughts of his, I would have killed him long ago to prevent future troubles. Unfortunately, there's currently no one more suitable to help me control the Scorpio star domain. After deliberating for a moment, Ji Tianqing decided not to fuss over Blue Scorpion God King's mistake for the time being. He sent a transmission to Blue Scorpion God King, briefly explaining the situation and ordering him to speed up the pace of counterattack. This king used Divine King Evil Soul's name to summon Divine King Longwind and already set up an ambush to kill him. Now, no one can stop your counterattack. This king will personally head to the distant star and kill Marshal Thundercry. You have 3 years to end this battle and take control of the entire Scorpio star domain. If you have any more excuses or are incompetent, then this king can only choose someone else. You don't need to exist anymore. After sending this transmission, Ji Tianqing returned to the distorted spacetime and continued to cultivate in seclusion. The Sword of Burial of Heaven also did not stop in the slightest, continuing to rush to the distant star in the depths of the star domain. Chapter 3950. Very far away from Ji Tianqing, on a certain star roughly 4 billion miles away. Blue Scorpion God King and a dozen God King generals were currently discussing military matters in the conference hall. Blue Scorpion God King sat on the throne at the head, his expression calm and indifferent. On the other hand, the dozen or so generals in the main hall were in high spirits and somewhat agitated. Alliance Chief, God King Evil Soul is already dead. Only Marshal Lei Ming is left to command those trash remotely. What are we still afraid of? That's right. Alliance Chief, in this month, we've won consecutive battles and defeated them long ago. Why don't we take advantage of the victory to pursue and attack? Alliance Chief, our army's morale is high. Everyone can't wait to reclaim the lost land. This is the best opportunity for us to counterattack. Alliance Chief, please don't hesitate anymore. The soldiers' weapons have long been thirsting for blood and can't hold back. Many generals were persuading Blue Scorpion God King to take advantage of the victory to pursue and beat the enemy while they were down. Because in this month, the soldiers under his command had won one battle after another, while the soldiers under God King Evil Soul's command had been routed 1,000 miles away. Everyone did not understand why Blue Scorpion God King did not take action at such a critical juncture. It was truly puzzling. Seeing that everyone was agitated and clamoring for a long time without any intention of stopping, Blue Scorpion God King waved his hand. The Blue Scorpion God King waved his hand, indicating for everyone to quiet down. He said in a low voice, I can understand your feelings. Now is indeed the best time to counterattack. But don't forget, our backer is God King Draconis. As early as a month ago, Divine King Draconic Heavens had already warned me repeatedly that I must fight steadily and surely, and must not rush to succeed. After all, God King Draconis is at a higher level and sees further. He knows many secrets that we don't know. Everyone, don't be anxious. A few months earlier or a few months later, we will be able to reclaim the lost land sooner or later and destroy God King Evil Soul's army. But to rashly go into battle and fall into the enemy's trap, no one can bear this responsibility. Just now, God King Draconis sent a message asking about the battle situation. I've already answered truthfully. Next, we just have to wait patiently for orders. The generals were speechless. Although they were unwilling in their hearts, they did not dare to say anything more. Everyone was well aware of some things. Although Long Tian didn't appear in front of everyone, he didn't give orders or make any plans. But that kind of peak Divine King existence was everyone's backer and confidence. If not for Long Tian finishing off the Evil Soul Divine King, how could everyone have the chance to counterattack? If Long Tian could support the Blue Scorpion God King, the Domain Master of the Sky Scorpion Galaxy could naturally support others. As for these puppets, what they had to do was to obey orders and not act recklessly. Seeing that the generals were no longer arguing, the Blue Scorpion God King inwardly sneered and waved his hand to dismiss them. But at this moment, a beam of light flew into the conference hall and landed in front of the blue scorpion god king. His hand stiffened in midair, and he quickly picked up the communication jade slip to check the information inside. The 10 odd generals were also filled with anticipation as they stared at the blue scorpion god king. Without a doubt, this jade slip was sent by Ji Tianqing. After the blue scorpion god king finished reading, he was filled with shock. His eyes flashed with deep shock, and he actually froze on the spot. More than a dozen generals were puzzled and hurriedly asked. Alliance Chief, is it a message from Divine King Long Tian? What did that lord say? Are there any new orders? Alliance Chief, did something happen? Facing everyone's questions, the blue scorpion god king was silent for a moment before opening his mouth to explain, you guys guessed right. It's indeed a message from Divine King Long Tian. Everyone should have heard that behind the evil soul Divine King, there's also a powerful backer called Divine King Changfeng. That's a peak Divine King who very rarely shows his face in the Sky Scorpion galaxy. Even this seat has never seen his true appearance before. Just over a month ago, Divine King Changfeng arrived at the Sky Scorpion galaxy. He learned that the evil soul Divine King was defeated and wanted to avenge him. But Long Tian actually used the evil soul Divine King's name to send a message to Divine King Changfeng for help. Following that, Divine King Changfeng fell into Long Tian's ambush and was killed on the spot. Which is also to say that the evil soul Divine King is dead, and even his backer was killed too. Now, there's already no one who can threaten us, much less stop our footsteps of occupying the Sky Scorpion galaxy. After hearing his words, the dozen or so generals were stunned. Everyone was shocked and found it hard to believe. What? Divine King Changfeng was killed too? My God! That's a peak Divine King. Divine King Long Tian actually killed him. How did he do it? Too inconceivable. Our backer, Divine King Long Tian, is actually so powerful. Steady, steady. With an expert like Divine King Long Tian as our backer, the Sky Scorpion galaxy will definitely be ours. Ha ha ha. This is simply great news. Lord Alliance Chief, since there's no one who can threaten us anymore, then what are we still waiting for? While the generals were pleasantly surprised, they were all agitated. All of them were rubbing their fists and palms together, wishing that they could immediately kill all of the evil-souled Divine King's former subordinates. The blue scorpion god king put away the transmission jade slip and hurriedly waved his hand to indicate for everyone to be quiet. His tone was grave as he exhorted, everyone, be quiet. We indeed don't need to wait anymore. We can counterattack now. But everyone, please remember that Divine King Long Tian gave us a deadline. 3 years. At the latest, within 3 years, we must defeat the evil soul Divine King's former subordinates and take over the entire Sky Scorpion galaxy. This time is too tight, it's almost impossible to accomplish. Therefore, from now on, we will have to rush and fight non-stop. There will be no more time to rest. The hall, which had been noisy just a moment ago, instantly quieted down. Everyone had a stunned expression on their faces. 3 years? Isn't that too short? The Sky Scorpion galaxy is so vast. How can 3 years be enough? 10 years is more like it. Why did Divine King Long Tian give such an order? It's impossible to accomplish. The excitement of the generals immediately vanished into thin air and turned into astonishment and worry. The blue scorpion god king could not bring himself to be happy. He was also filled with worry. He knew that Divine King Long Tian had already seen through his thoughts. This 3-year deadline was Divine King Long Tian's punishment for him. If he could not accomplish it, his fate would be miserable. Therefore, the blue scorpion god king stood up and took a deep breath. His expression was stern as he ordered, "Weren't your morale high just now, all of you clamoring to go to war? Now that Divine King Long Tian has given the order, are you all afraid? I don't care what method you use, I don't care how much you sacrifice, in short, within 3 years, you must defeat the remnants of the evil soul Divine King's army and take over the entire Sky Scorpion galaxy. If you can't complete this mission, I will personally kill you. Then, I will ask for Divine King Long Tian's forgiveness and commit suicide in front of him. Therefore, we only have 2 choices. Either complete the mission or die. Chapter 39:51. Although Blue Scorpion God King was overly scheming and was disliked by Ji Tianqing. But one had to admit that his methods of commanding his subordinates were indeed impressive. Those God King experts and generals under his command were all wholeheartedly convinced by him and did not dare to have the slightest complaint. Especially Ji Tianqing's death order. It was like a mountain, pressing down on everyone's hearts, incomparably heavy. The lives of Blue Scorpion God King and the generals were all tied together. If they did not succeed, they would die. This way, everyone's hot-bloodedness was aroused. Very soon, Blue Scorpion God King made the arrangements. The generals received the order and left to lead the troops into battle. A massive and ferocious counterattack erupted in the central region of the star field. This time, the generals under Blue Scorpion God King's command changed from their previous steadiness and caution, becoming abnormally frenzied and radical. Even the Blue Scorpion God King personally led a large army into the depths of the star domain while commanding the generals of the various forces in battle. The generals under God King Evil Soul had long learned of the news of God King Evil Soul's death. They were all out of their wits and filled with fear. The repeated defeats previously caused their morale to plummet to the extreme. Now, encountering the dauntless charge of Blue Scorpion God King's army, the generals were completely routed. Blue Scorpion God King led the generals under his command and advanced triumphantly. It could be said that they were invincible in every battle. On the other side, the God King experts under God King Evil Soul were also in a state of panic and unease. When these generals who led the troops into battle at the front lines learned of God King Evil Soul's death, their hearts were already heavy and filled with worry. However, Marshal Thundercry was still alive and was still commanding the many generals on the distant star. Many generals felt that even if God King Evil Soul was killed, Marshal Thundercry could still succeed the throne. They still had a leader and could still occupy the Scorpion Star field. However, at some unknown time, some rumors began to circulate among the various generals. I heard that our great backer, that God King Changfeng, came to the Scorpion Star field. He originally wanted to kill that foreign race God King and avenge God King Evil Soul. Who knew that he fell into the foreign race God King's ambush and was killed instead? Now that we have no backing and no leader, only Marshal Lei Ming is left. As soon as this piece of news came out, many generals trembled with fear and shock. For a time, many of the generals lost the will to fight. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, only thinking about how to preserve their strength and survive. Therefore, some of the generals and soldiers under their command quietly fled the front lines and hid in their own planets. Most of them were star lords with their own planets, citizens, and forces. As long as they did not continue to participate in the war, no matter who was in charge of the Scorpio galaxy in the future, they only needed to pledge their loyalty. In this way, he could preserve his life and power. No matter who the heavenly Scorpion domain master was, they would just obediently be star lords. Although it was a little embarrassing, it was still a little shameful. However, in the Scorpio star zone, where the strong preyed on the weak, this was nothing. How could loyalty and dignity be more important than one's life? The Star Lords could flee back to their respective planets. However, some of the generals loyal to God King Evil Soul were caught in a dilemma. They could either stay at the front lines and continue to fight bloody battles, waiting for the end of being killed. Or they could flee from the front lines and hurry back to the distant star as soon as possible to listen to Marshal Lei Ming's arrangements. They still had a trace of hope in their hearts. Perhaps Marshal Lei Ming had some trump card that could turn the situation around and save their lives. Just like that, while the front lines collapsed, countless generals quietly fled back to the distant star. The sword of burial of heaven flew in the void for more than a month and finally arrived near the distant star. A huge star appeared in the void in front of it, as dazzling as the sun. The surface of that star was covered in a thick layer of golden light. That was a space barrier, a natural protective layer. This was the distant star, one of the largest and richest stars in the Scorpio galaxy. The sword of burial of heaven was still 500 million miles away from the distant star. It would take about 2 days to arrive. At this moment, the sword of burial of heaven suddenly slowed down and quietly flew to the left. At the same time, the sword of burial of heaven woke up Ji Tianqing, who was in seclusion in the distorted space. During this period of time, Ji Tianqing had been cultivating in seclusion. He had consumed a huge amount of cultivation resources and had reached the mid-stage of the 9th level Divine King realm. His realm was very stable, and his divine power was very vigorous. Sword of burial of heaven, why have you woken me up? Have you arrived at the distant star? Ji Tianqing left the divine pagoda and appeared in the sword world. He asked with his divine telekinesis. The sword of burial of heaven replied, the distant star is just ahead. We will arrive in 2 days. However, I have discovered a group of foreign race experts. They should have fled back from the front lines. Ji Tianqing stayed in the sword world and used the sword of burial of heaven's perspective to observe the void in front of him to the left. As expected, in the void 80,000 miles away, there were 2 battleships that were 3,000 feet long. They were rushing toward the distant star as fast as lightning. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to let the sword of burial of heaven speed up and chase after them. Previously, when he sent a message to the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being and gave him 3 years to unify the Scorpion Galaxy, he had already made up his mind. He wanted to kill Marshal Lei Ming and the Supreme Being experts on the distant star and eliminate the evil Soul Supreme Being's loyal subordinates. This was the only way to reduce the resistance of the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being and allow him to unify the entire galaxy within 3 years. Ji Tianqing had too many things to do. Destroying the 9 Suns God Emperor's scheme and taking control of the Scorpion Galaxy was a small matter. He could not waste too much time on this matter. Therefore, he could only use some simple and violent methods. Swoosh! In just a few breaths, the sword of burial of heaven stopped the 2 battleships. From the insignia and flag on the battleships, they should belong to the same general. The 2 battleships advanced side by side. Seeing that they were about to return to the distant star, the tens of thousands of soldiers on the battleships looked relieved. Just as the sword of burial of heaven said, these soldiers had fled back from the front lines. Most of them were scarred and weak. Their expressions and eyes were full of fatigue. They had thought that they would be able to return to the distant star in 2 or 3 days and rest in peace. Unexpectedly, a golden sword aura that was tens of thousands of feet long suddenly blocked their way. The 2 battleships stopped at the same time. The soldiers on the battleships were all tense as if they were facing a formidable enemy. They observed the void in front of them and were relieved when they did not see any battleships or enemy troops. Several godly king experts in the 2 warships hurriedly pacified the many officers and soldiers. However, they did not leave the battleships. They stayed in the control room at the front of the battleships and observed the giant sword aura carefully. Not coming out. In the sword of burial of heaven, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and muttered to himself, do I have to destroy those 2 battleships and kill everyone? He felt that this was a bit inappropriate, so he left the world in the sword and appeared in the void. Swoosh! He turned into a 10,000 feet tall golden armored giant holding the sword of burial of heaven. He pointed at the 2 battleships and shouted angrily, who is the general leading the troops? Come out and answer me. Chapter 3952. Ji Tianqing's words were transmitted into the two battleships through his soul consciousness. Instantly, the 10,000 soldiers on the battleships heard the same words in their heads. Many Sir gods and divine gods who were injured and exhausted were confused. They didn't know what Ji Tianqing wanted to do. The 9 King God Realm generals looked at Ji Tianqing cautiously. They were trying to guess his identity and purpose. They couldn't tell if Ji Tianqing was a friend or a foe. Therefore, no one answered Ji Tianqing and no one left the battleships. Ji Tianqing waited for a moment before frowning in displeasure and shouting coldly again, "This king will give you 3 breaths of time. If the generals still don't come out, this king will destroy these 2 warships and bury all of you here." While he was talking, he released a powerful aura that covered the 2 battleships like an invisible tide. Nearly 10,000 soldiers in the battleship felt the terrifying pressure. Many divine monarchs and heaven gods were shivering in fear. Even the 9 divine king generals were terrified and uneasy. The leader of the 9 generals was a great general who was at the peak of the 7th level of the divine king realm. The other 8 were deputy generals who were at the 5th or 6th level of the divine king realm. The great general tidied his blood-stained armor and tightened his scarlet cape. He held his battle halberd and was about to step out of the battleship. At this moment, the deputy generals stopped him and tried to persuade him. "Great general, you can't go out. That alien race expert is obviously not friendly. It's too dangerous for you to go out. Great general, you should stay in the battleship. We have the protection of the divine battleship. I don't think he can do anything to us. No matter what that alien race expert wants to do, the distant star is right in front of us. We'll be able to go home soon. Please be patient." Everyone knew that the alien race expert was here to cause trouble. They should avoid him as much as they could. The great general was a little hesitant. However, he had to show up because of his dignity and dignity. Since the deputy generals were trying to dissuade him, he stopped and said worriedly, "How could I not know that the foreign race's powerhouse has ill intentions? But you also heard it. If I don't go out, he will destroy the 2 battleships and kill everyone. I'd rather sacrifice myself than let nearly 10,000 men die here." The great general spoke with a strong sense of righteousness, causing many of the deputy generals to sigh with emotion and flatter him. Even the 5,000 soldiers in the warship were moved. At this time, 3 breaths of time had passed. Ji Tianqing's complexion turned cold. He didn't waste any more time. He directly swung the sword of burial of heaven and slashed out 2 sword lights that were tens of thousands of feet long toward the 2 battleships. The dazzling golden sword light tore through the night like a bolt of lightning. It carried with it a supreme divine might and an unparalleled aura. Boom! The 2 warships were unable to dodge and were immediately struck by the huge sword light. With a burst of golden light, the 2 battleships shook violently and were pushed back hundreds of miles. The back of the 2 battleships had a huge gap cut open by the huge sword. Countless metal fragments scattered. The unparalleled violent impact caused the battleships to roll more than 10 times before barely stopping in the void. The soldiers in the battleships were all thrown into confusion and chaos. Several hundred unlucky soldiers were in the gap of the battleships and were insta-killed by the sword light on the spot. There were also some soldiers who passed through the gap and were thrown into the void. Those divine Lord Realm powerhouses were still fine. The ordinary celestial God Realm soldiers couldn't stay in the void and collapsed and perished very quickly. For a moment, all the soldiers were terrified and only wanted to abandon the battleships and escape. The great general and the 8 deputy generals couldn't be bothered to comfort the 9,000 soldiers. They hurriedly flew out of the battleships and flew toward Ji Tianqing. Reality proved that the other party had the strength to destroy the 2 battleships. They didn't dare to hide anymore, afraid that the other party would really kill everyone. Swoosh! The great general and the 8 deputy generals flew near Ji Tianqing and stopped when they were tens of thousands of feet away from him. Everyone was filled with vigilance and wariness. They spread out one after another, drawing their divine weapons and surrounding Ji Tianqing. Who are you? We don't know you and have no enmity. Why are you attacking us? The great general held the divine spear in his hand and glared at Ji Tianqing, yelling with grief and indignation. Ji Tianqing was disdainful to answer and asked in a solemn voice, "Your divine king Evil Soul's direct descendant?" The great general was stunned on the spot, unable to figure out the other party's stance and intentions. He did not know how to answer and chose to remain silent. Rather, it was those 8 deputy generals who saw through the signs and wanted to resolve this conflict. "Senior, what's your relationship with Divine King Evil Soul? Are you here to preside over the overall situation and deal with Divine King Blue Scorpion?" The way these deputy generals saw it, Ji Tianqing appeared outside Distant Star and was alone. This mysterious powerhouse was very likely related to Divine King Evil Soul's backer. Although there were rumors that Divine King Changfeng was killed by an outsider race powerhouse, who stipulated that Divine King Changfeng had no relatives or friends. Who could be certain that Divine King Evil Soul's backer was just Divine King Changfeng? These deputy generals were in a hopeless situation, so it was inevitable that they would have some delusions and extravagant hopes. Ji Tianqing stared at the crowd expressionlessly. He didn't answer and only grunted in response. Instantly, the great general and the 8 deputy generals widened their eyes, intense shock and ecstasy surging from their hearts. "Are you really here to help us?" "Ha ha ha. I knew it. Divine King Evil Soul's backer isn't that simple. Now, we can finally hold our heads high and take revenge. With such a powerhouse holding the fort, we can still dominate the Scorpion Star Zone." Everyone was overjoyed, and a few deputy generals could not help but clap their hands in celebration. Ji Tianqing was still staring at the great general and said in a solemn voice, "You haven't answered this king's question." The great general was cautious and still had some misgivings. However, those deputy generals who saw hope and gained new life all scrambled to answer for him. "That's right. The great general is precisely Divine King Evil Soul's direct descendant, one of the most loyal generals. Divine King Evil Soul has 27 great generals under his command. Our great general is precisely one of the most loyal few. The great general's loyalty to Divine King Evil Soul can be witnessed by the sun and moon, heaven and earth as witnesses." Hearing these few deputy generals' answers, Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a satisfied smile and said with a nod, "Very good. Since that's the case, then you all can go and die." Finished talking, he waved his hand and fired out golden light that filled the sky, forming a massive light screen, sealing off the surrounding void. The great general and the 8 deputy generals were all suppressed inside the Grand Array. But those 2 damaged warships were repelled outside the Grand Array. The great general and the few deputy generals were all stunned, staring at Ji Tianqing dumbfoundedly. Only then did they wake up like waking up from a dream. "What, do you mean? You're not Divine King Evil Soul's backer, you're here to kill us. Damn it. It's you who killed Divine King Evil Soul." Chapter 3953. The Grand General and the Deputy Generals then realized that they had been deceived. Their guess was just wishful thinking. The powerful expert of the foreign race in front of them was the person who was least likely to appear. The person who had killed God King Evil Soul and God King Changfeng. Now that he had appeared in the vicinity of the distant star, everyone knew what this meant. Eliminate the source of trouble. After being stunned for a moment, the 8 deputy generals all wielded their divine weapons and charged towards Ji Tianqing without caring about anything else. The Grand General didn't counterattack. His first reaction was to take out his communication jade slip to inform Marshal Lei Ming. Obviously, he wasn't the most loyal general to God King Evil Soul, but a direct subordinate of Marshal Lei Ming. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing's body flashed with golden light, and 9 doppelgangers appeared. Swish. 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 The 9 doppelgangers surrounded the 8 deputy generals while his original body charged toward the Grand General. Bam! 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 Inside the ceiling array, golden light flashed as sword chi swept across. Loud bangs could be heard. In just 2 breaths' time, the 8 deputy generals were killed by Ji Tianqing's 9 doppelgangers. All of them were smashed into pieces, and their divine sparks shattered. As for the Grand General, he was killed by Ji Tianqing before he could send out his communication jade slip. His body and divine sparks crumbled together, turning into countless pieces of flesh and blood that scattered in the void. After the sky full of sword light dissipated, the array regained its peace. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and put away their godhead fragments and spatial rings before waving his hand to remove the grand ceiling formation. At that moment, in the 2 dilapidated battleships not far away, more than 9,000 Sir gods and heaven gods were filled with anxiety and fear. They only knew that the 9 deputy generals were fighting with the powerful expert of the foreign race in the Golden Light Array, but they didn't know the outcome. Now, Ji Tianqing appeared unscathed, but the 9 deputy generals had disappeared without a trace. There was still a large amount of debris in the void. As long as one wasn't a fool, one would know what was going on. Instantly, many soldiers screamed in fear. Some even flew out of the battleships and fled deep into the void. Ji Tianqing didn't make things difficult for them. He allowed the 2 battleships to turn around and flee into the depths of the void. He believed that the ordinary soldiers who had lost their leader would be utterly defeated and fall apart. At the very least, they no longer had the courage to fight against the Blue Scorpion God King's army. To Ji Tianqing, this matter was just a small interlude. After the 2 battleships escaped, he returned to the Sword of Burial of Heaven and continued to fly to the distant star. This time, he didn't encounter the non-humankind army that had fled back to the distant star. 3 days later, Ji Tianqing broke through the space barrier of the distant star and entered it. On this huge planet, there were 11 continents and many oceans. The climate was very warm. It had to be said that compared to other planets, the distant star had more spiritual chi, and there were more treasures and cultivation resources. There were hundreds of billions of alien races living here. It could be said to be very prosperous and prosperous. However, all the major star fields had a common problem. Their divine power was never as abundant as the Dragon Realm and the God Realm. Therefore, even though there were hundreds of billions of alien races, it was very difficult for a God King expert to be born. There were very few God Kings on this planet, and a peak God King had never appeared before. After Ji Tianqing entered Distant Star, he landed on an unfamiliar continent. Originally, he needed to sneak into a kingdom to find out more about Distant Star and find out Marshal Lei Ming's whereabouts. However, he felt that it was too troublesome and a waste of time. Therefore, he entered the second level of 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Tower and found the unconscious God King Evil Soul. God King Evil Soul had been suppressed here, and his injuries were as severe as before. He didn't have the chance to recover. When Ji Tianqing found him, he was still unconscious, and his aura was very weak. Ji Tianqing woke him up and asked him where his base was, as well as the situation of the God Palace's defenses. God King Evil Soul's consciousness woke up, but he was lying on the ground and didn't want to move. He was panting heavily. Hearing Ji Tianqing's question, he glanced at Ji Tianqing and asked in a low and hoarse voice, "You've already reached Distant Star. You want to kill all of us?" With God King Evil Soul's shrewdness, he could guess what happened after hearing Ji Tianqing's question. Ji Tianqing didn't hide it and nodded in acknowledgement. God King Evil Soul's mouth twitched, and he sneered, "You want to destroy my base and kill all my loyal soldiers, and you still want me to point you in the right direction?" Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, "It does sound a bit ridiculous, but this king believes that you will be willing." He was so sure because he saw through God King Evil Soul's thoughts. God King Evil Soul still had a sliver of hope in his heart, and he wouldn't give up until the very last moment. In order to live, he could sacrifice everything. This included his loyal soldiers and his adopted son, Marshal Lei Ming. As expected, God King Evil Soul was silent for a long time before asking, "I've already lost. Since you support God King Blue Scorpion, the Sky Scorpion Star region will soon be under his control. But I don't understand, why didn't you kill me?" It was precisely because Ji Tianqing didn't kill him after capturing him that he had hope of living. He could roughly guess that Ji Tianqing didn't kill him because he still had some use. But he couldn't guess the exact reason. Ji Tianqing smiled faintly and said, "Didn't you say it before? You are the last demon in this world, so this king has decided to keep you alive. Perhaps you will be of use in the future." God King Evil Soul understood. Ji Tianqing meant that he wouldn't kill him in the short term. But it was hard to say what would happen in the future. But being able to keep his life for the time being already made him feel slightly relieved. Thousand Island Continent, Thousand Elephant Mountain Range. After a moment of silence, God King Evil Soul said these words in a low voice. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything else and turned to leave Nine Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda. After confirming his target, Ji Tianqing only needed to find out where Thousand Island Continent was. 4 days later, Ji Tianqing successfully arrived at Thousand Island Continent on the Sword of Burial of Heaven. Then, he used a little trick to inquire about the location of Thousand Elephant Mountain Range and rushed there on the Sword of Burial of Heaven. This time, he only used a day to enter the depths of Thousand Elephant Mountain Range and found the location of the Divine Palace. Within a radius of 200,000 miles, there were towering mountains and endless forests. In the deepest part of the mountain range, there was a place shrouded in fog and protected by a powerful array. Ji Tianqing used the Divine Eye mystic technique and saw through the layers of fog. In the vast sea of clouds, there was a dazzling golden light and overlapping palaces. Without a doubt, that was the God King Evil Soul's Divine Palace. Ji Tianqing entered a state of invisibility and easily broke through the defensive array. He entered the thick fog and headed straight for the Divine Palace. Even though there were many traps, defensive arrays, and warning arrays around the Divine Palace. But these were not difficult for Ji Tianqing. He didn't alert anyone and quietly found his way to the entrance of the Divine Palace. Chapter 3954. The palace complex spanned nearly 100 miles and was made up of thousands of palaces and buildings. It could be seen that God King Evil Soul had put in a lot of thought when he ordered people to build this palace. Be it the layout of the palaces and buildings, or the style of the buildings, they all contained deep meaning. Every palace was richly ornamented and resplendent. The interior decorations were also extremely luxurious. The foreign races that lived in these palaces were at least God Lord experts. They were the guards of the palace and there were more than 6,000 of them. In addition, there were 23 God King experts who were in the depths of the palace. They were scattered across a few palaces. The palace was heavily guarded. Every passageway and entrance were heavily guarded. There were guards patrolling in the sky and many sentries were placed underground to monitor the movements inside and outside the palace. Ji Tianqing remained invisible as he scouted around the Divine Palace to get a clear picture of the defenses. He raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, God King Evil Soul said that he only left behind a few God Kings and 3,000 God Lord guards when he left. Now, there are actually 23 God Kings and more than 6,000 God Lords. From the looks of it, some of the generals who led troops on the front lines fled back here in advance. In addition, Marshal Lei Ming also knows that the situation is dangerous. He gathered the factions that are loyal to him and increased the palace's defenses by several times. Ji Tianqing had long expected that Marshal Lei Ming, as the adopted son of God King Evil Soul, was deeply admired and trusted by many generals. He was definitely not a useless person. Since that was the case, he needed to catch them all in one fell swoop and not leave any loopholes. He still needed to plan. Hence, he walked around the palace and secretly scouted the defensive array. He also secretly buried some king-grade divine artifacts. 4 hours later, he walked around the palace. Not only did he find a way to break the array, he also buried 36 king-grade divine artifacts as the array foundation of the array. And at that moment, the guards and god kings in the palace did not notice anything amiss. Ji Tianqing did not waste any time and immediately took action. Swish! He formed a divine seal with both hands and sent out thousands of strands of divine power into the ground beneath his feet. Thousands of streaks of divine power shuttled through the ground like a giant net, covering the entire divine palace and connecting the 36 divine artifacts. In the next moment, as soon as the guards and god kings sensed that something was wrong, a dazzling golden light erupted. Shwa! At the same time, golden light soared into the sky from all around the divine palace, forming a light screen with a radius of 100 miles, covering the entire divine palace like a heavenly curtain. The great formation was formed, and it began to operate, sealing off this region. At the same time, thousands of light pillars erupted from the array and blasted towards the various nodes of the defensive array. With a series of loud rumbling sounds, the defensive array of the divine palace was shattered in an instant. As a result, the divine palace lost its defensive array and was sealed by Ji Tianqing's array. The hasty sound of horns rang out from the divine palace, as well as the roars and shouts of countless guards. Everyone realized the danger, and countless guards quickly gathered. Many god-king powerhouses also appeared one after another, rushing out from various palaces and flying high into the sky. Ji Tianqing stood at the summit of the most majestic palace, looking at the figures in all directions, waiting patiently. These guards and god kings guarding the divine palace were all elites under Martial Thundercry's command. Their reactions were very swift. In a short 10 breaths of time, more than 6,000 Divine Lord Realm guards all gathered, divided into 8 teams, guarding various parts of the divine palace. 23 god kings also all appeared, standing in the sky above the divine palace, holding divine weapons and sharp blades in their hands, glaring at Ji Tianqing like a tiger watching its prey. The situation in the field looked like Ji Tianqing was surrounded by a magnificent army with thousands of men and horses. But those several thousand guards and 20 over god kings were akin to facing a great enemy. Each and every one of them had grim faces, their expressions solemn. They were all well aware in their hearts that a foreign race powerhouse who could silently barge into the divine palace and instantly destroy the defensive array was absolutely a pinnacle god king. Facing such a powerhouse, they did not have much of a chance of victory. Ji Tianqing waited with an indifferent expression. The many god kings and guards were in no hurry to attack. The atmosphere in the field was a little heavy, and many guards were a little nervous. And in fact, facing Ji Tianqing's sudden attack, the longer the stalemate between both sides, the more advantageous it was for them. At the very least, they would have more time to prepare. After about 10 breaths of time, a muscular foreign race powerhouse flew into the sky from the depths of the divine palace. This powerhouse had the upper body of a human, but the lower body of a purple flame demon wolf grew. He wore a purple lightning armor, and there was a sharp horn on his head. His entire body emitted a violent aura. When the many god kings and guards saw him appear, they all bowed in greeting. Without a doubt, this was Martial Thundercry. Ji Tianqing's gaze also landed on him, sizing him up expressionlessly. Martial Thundercry held a halberd in his hand and came to the sky. He was 100,000 feet away from Ji Tianqing as they faced each other across space. He looked at Ji Tianqing and said in a deep voice, "A long time ago, this king guessed that today would come, that you would kill your way into the divine palace. I did not expect that this day would still come." Ji Tianqing said with an indifferent expression, "You know who this king is?" "Of course." Marshal Thundercry nodded slightly and said in a solemn tone, "You are the foreign race powerhouse who supported Blue Scorpion God King. You barged into our territory and killed several generals. Even this king's foster father, and our backer, God King Changfeng, were killed by you. Previously, there were rumors that you schemed to kill God King Changfeng, but this king did not quite believe it. Now that you have appeared here, it should be true." Ji Tianqing could not help but have a higher opinion of him. He said, "To be honest, you are much more interesting than your foster father. However, since you know who this king is and also guessed that this king would come, why are you still staying here to wait for death?" Marshal Thundercry smiled and said in a calm tone, "Foster father is already dead. This king is the commander-in-chief of the million soldiers and also their last pillar of support. If even this king fled without fighting, how can I face those soldiers who fought bravely while bathed in blood? Even if I know that I will lose and die in battle, this king also cannot shrink back. Moreover, without truly fighting, who knows what the outcome will be?" After saying that, Marshal Lei Ming held his battle halberd and looked around at the 23 god kings and over 6,000 guards. He said in a clear voice, "Soldiers, the one standing in front of us now is a peak god king expert from the dragon domain. In our lives, we might only have this one chance to exchange blows with a peak god king. Ben Shui asks you all, are you afraid?" Several thousand people held their heads high and puffed out their chests, roaring in unison, "Not afraid." Marshal Thundercry revealed a satisfied smile and said to Ji Tianqing, "See that? These are the elite direct subordinates under this king's command. Even if you are a peak god king, you are still alone after all. Over 6,000 of us, even if we die in battle here, we also have to give it our all and see if we can slay a god." Chapter 3955. Marshal Laming's words could be said to be imposing, solemn, and stirring. But very unfortunately, Ji Tianqing frowned, a hint of killing intent flashing across his eyes. If these people were like a plate of loose sand or fence-sitters, then he could only kill the generals and let the 6,000 overguards go. But everyone was so united, they were as strong as an impregnable fortress. He had to consider that even if he killed Marshal Lei Ming and the Divine King Realm generals, those guards would also think of ways to take revenge. Although he was not afraid of these guards taking revenge. But if these people entered the battlefield, they would definitely create a certain amount of trouble for Blue Scorpion Divine King's army. Hence, Ji Tianqing made up his mind on the spot. "Marshal Lei Ming, this king will give you one last chance. Dismiss these guards and let them leave Distant Star, and this king can spare their lives." The implication was that he would only kill Marshal Lei Ming and the 23 divine kings. When Marshal Lei Ming heard, he immediately became somewhat hesitant, frowning as he weighed the pros and cons. However, the 23 godly kings and over 6,000 Sir gods objected in unison. "No. Marshal, you absolutely can't agree to him. We swear to live and die with Marshal. Marshal, we'd rather die than retreat. We must fight alongside you. Marshal, you mustn't fall for his evil scheme. If all of us join hands, we still have a chance to kill him." Marshal Lei Ming, who was originally still a little hesitant, immediately made up his mind when he heard the persuasion of the many divine kings and guard commanders. He shook his battle halberd, pointed it straight at Ji Tianqing, and shouted coldly, "You're a peak divine king. Could it be that you're afraid of us, these weaklings? Still want to use this kind of trick to make this king send away all the guards? Give up. Today, we're determined to fight to the death with you to the end." Finished talking, Marshal Lei Ming roared angrily and gave the order to attack. "Kill." Following his order, the 23 divine king powerhouses took the lead to launch a besiegement. They executed all kinds of divine abilities and ultimate skills, erupting with their strongest power, releasing divine art light shadows, lightning, and flames that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. The 6,000 over Divine Lord Realm Guards also joined hands to form a battle formation, releasing divine power at the same time, slashing out a light blade that could split heaven and earth apart. Ji Tianqing was about to be engulfed by the monstrous five-colored divine light. However, he had no intention of dodging. His entire body lit up with a hazy golden light as he used the indestructible golden body to protect himself. At the same time, he raised the sword of burial of heaven and shouted, "Sword rain!" In a split second, more than 50,000 silver light spots appeared in the sky. Like a meteor shower, they poured down toward the divine palace. Immediately after, Ji Tianqing brandished his divine sword again, slashing out sword lights that filled the sky, blocking the attacks of the numerous god kings. Rumble. The sword light collided with the divine light and shadow that filled the sky, causing a deafening explosion. The torrent of divine light released by thousands of guards hit Ji Tianqing hard and drowned his figure. However, under the protection of the indestructible golden body, he was able to block all the attacks and remained unscathed. When the five-colored torrent dissipated, he was still standing on top of the palace, not moving an inch. However, the towering palace beneath his feet, as well as the surrounding palaces and buildings, were blasted into ruins by the divine light that filled the sky. Before they could launch a second round of attacks, the rain of swords finally descended from the sky. Rumble. Those were 50,000 starry giant swords. With the power to destroy everything, they covered the divine palace within a 100-mile radius. There were continuous explosions that shook the sky, and the entire divine palace became a sea of silver sword light. It was chaotic, and nothing could be seen clearly. The first round of attacks from the 50,000 starry giant swords killed more than 4,000 guards on the spot and blasted them into pieces. There were also a few unlucky middle-level god kings who died tragically under the starry giant swords. Not even their bones were left. Immediately after, the tens of thousands of starry giant swords shuttled back and forth between heaven and earth, intertwining and dancing, killing all the foreign race experts. How could the 2,000 or so guards who were lucky enough to survive withstand the 10,000 swords? In less than 2 breaths' time, they were killed by the sword light, turning into a rain of blood and dust. After a while, the tens of thousands of starry giant swords finally dissipated. The silver light that shrouded the divine palace faded, and the battlefield was revealed. One could only see that the magnificent divine palace had become a tragic sight. The area within a 100-mile radius was in ruins, and there was not a single intact palace or building. There were deep pits and gaping ravines everywhere. The ground was covered with shattered bricks and stones. The divine palace that the evil soul divine king spent 100 years of painstaking effort to build was destroyed just like that. The 6,000 over divine lord realm guards were also all blasted to death. Not even their corpses remained. Even the Lien heir's 13 divine kings were also blasted to death. Their divine sparks turned into fragments. The 15 foreign race divine kings who survived were also all injured, their appearances wretched and wretched. Martial Thundercry's injuries were the lightest, but his expression was very ugly. Both eyes were filled with terror. He stood in the sky rather dazedly, looking at the wretched state in the ruins, murmuring despondently, "This is the power of peak divine kings." Even though he was already cautious enough, imagining peak divine kings to be very powerful. But only when the battle really happened did he know how laughable his thoughts were. The strength and means of peak divine kings far exceeded his imagination. At this instant, Martial Thundercry regretted it. Ho. No wonder you could kill foster father and even plot to kill divine King Longwind. No wonder you dared to barge into the divine palace alone and could even not be discovered by anyone. If I had long known, why would I have brought everyone here to resign to death? Martial Thundercry's confidence crumbled. Both eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Ji Tianqing, roaring out under his breath. Ji Tianqing looked at him quietly and did not open his mouth to mock, nor was he in a hurry to make a move. Even though he had his own plans and had no choice but to take action to kill Marshal Thundercry. But speaking from the bottom of his heart, he still somewhat admired Marshal Thundercry. At the very least, this guy's performance still had some guts and bravery. He was much more adorable than the Blue Scorpion Divine King and the Evil Soul Divine King. Ji Tianqing did not like those two sly old foxes who swayed with the wind. The next instant, Marshal Thundercry's entire body burst forth with towering sanguine flames. With a seemingly frenzied roar, he wielded his battle halberd and charged towards Ji Tianqing. "I'd rather die standing than live kneeling down." He had already made up his mind to die. Carrying the conviction that he would definitely die, he launched a final attack towards Ji Tianqing. 11 of the 15 surviving alien god kings attacked with him as well. Only 4 of them were afraid. They took the opportunity to retreat and escape into the distance. Ji Tianqing used the draconic elephant divine fist with his left hand and brandished his sword with his right hand. He executed 2 sword Dao divine abilities consecutively. Heaven-cleaving sword. Daylight sword. A giant sword that could split heaven and earth descended from the sky, shattering Marshal Thundercry's divine ability in destroying his battle halberd, killing him on the spot. His divine body crumbled and his godhead shattered. He died directly. A cold light bloomed and rapidly expanded to a radius of 20 miles. Like a scorching sun, it engulfed the 11 godly kings. In the blink of an eye, they also turned into a rain of blood and powder. They died together with Marshal Thundercry. As for the 4 fleeing godly kings, they were stopped by the sealing array at the edge of the battlefield. Ji Tianqing teleported over and dealt with each of them with a single strike of his sword. What should have been a spectacular battle ended just like that. Chapter 3956. God King Evil Soul's divine palace had been destroyed and the generals loyal to Marshal Laming had been killed. Ji Tianqing stood above the ruins and inspected the battlefield. After confirming that there were no fish that had escaped the net, he removed the defensive array. Without the concealment of the array, the ruins within a radius of 100 miles were exposed to the sun. Although the ruins were hidden in the depths of a vast mountain range. Heaven and earth were filled with violent fluctuations of divine power that would not dissipate even after half a month. Ji Tianqing remained invisible and hid near the ruins, patiently waiting. 3 days later, 2 godly kings led hundreds of godly lords to the vicinity of the ruins. They had come to meet Marshal Laming, but when they arrived, they saw that the divine palace had long been reduced to ruins. There were countless broken walls, broken armor, and weapon fragments in the ruins. There was still violent divine power left in the world. As long as one was not a fool, they would understand what this meant. The 2 god kings and the many god lords were shocked and filled with fear and disbelief. They did not dare to stay near the ruins and hurriedly left. Ji Tianqing, who had been hiding himself, stayed near the ruins and watched the outsiders quietly. He didn't do anything to stop them. He believed that the 2 god kings and the several hundred god lords would definitely spread the news of the divine palace's destruction. After that, Ji Tianqing took out a jade slip and sent a message to God King Blue Scorpion. He first told God King Blue Scorpion that he had killed Marshal Laming and destroyed the Evil Soul Divine Palace. All the obstacles had been removed. If God King Blue Scorpion still could not complete the mission, it would be unforgivable. After God King Blue Scorpion received the message, he was naturally overjoyed and became more excited and confident. He quickly replied to Ji Tianqing, saying that he would definitely complete the mission and would not disappoint Ji Tianqing. After Ji Tianqing finished reading the jade slip, he ignored God King Blue Scorpion and continued to meditate in the dark. The situation was as he expected. The news of the divine palace's destruction had indeed spread. In the following half a month, god lords and god kings would come to the ruins almost every day to check the situation. Those were the people who had heard the rumors, refused to believe them, and insisted on personally investigating the situation. When they saw the divine palace turn into ruins with their own eyes, no matter how unbelievable it was, they could only accept this result. Therefore, the news of the destruction of the divine palace spread to the distant star and began to spread in the Scorpio star zone. In addition, the soldiers under the Blue Scorpion God King's command had also released the news. They claimed that the evil soul divine palace had been destroyed and that Marshal Lei Ming had been killed. The news spread from the front line to half of the Scorpio star zone within a month. At least 300 living beings on more than 300 planets knew about this news. In the beginning, many people didn't believe this news and couldn't accept this result. However, as more and more cultivators witnessed the ruins of the divine palace with their own eyes, the news spread. Gradually, this news was verified by more and more experts. A month later, countless non-humankind warriors had no choice but to accept this fact. In this way, the soldiers under the evil soul God King's command all collapsed, completely losing their will to fight. They didn't even have a commander. How could they continue to fight? For a time, the soldiers on the front line fled in disorder. The God King generals led their men and fled back to their own forces and territories. The various armies under the Blue Scorpion God King's command still encountered resistance at first, and the generals would put up a token resistance. However, a month later, the various armies under the Blue Scorpion God King's command no longer encountered any decent resistance. Wherever they went, the Star Lords of various planets would immediately run out to surrender and declare their loyalty. Of course, this so-called loyalty was only a formality, and those Star Lords weren't loyal at all. However, this way, the Blue Scorpion God King had at least nominally quickly conquered more than half of the Star Zone. Since so many Star Lords had taken the lead in surrendering, even more Star Lords would naturally follow suit. In this way, the Blue Scorpion God King's army advanced, conquering one planet after another. When Ji Tianqing had given the order to the Blue Scorpion God King, the latter had felt deeply pressured and felt that it would be impossible to conquer the Scorpio star zone within 3 years. Given the current situation, it wouldn't be difficult to complete the task within 3 years. Every time he thought of this and saw countless Star Lords bowing and surrendering, the Blue Scorpion God King couldn't help but sigh. The strength and methods of the Heavenly Dragon Divine King are truly terrifying. I'm so glad I didn't make an enemy of him back then, or I would have turned into a vengeful spirit long ago. Day after day passed. Time flew by. The Blue Scorpion God King was immersed in the excitement of conquering one planet after another, and he wanted to conquer the Scorpio star zone as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing had been hiding nearby the evil-souled divine palace ruins on the distant star. The 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda was hidden under the ruins, and he stayed in the distorted spacetime, cultivating in seclusion. He had obtained many quintessence fragments in the previous few battles. This time, his seclusion was mainly to refine those quintessence fragments, followed by God King Changfeng's divine hammer. Speaking of killing God King Changfeng back then, Ji Tianqing felt that it was somewhat beyond his expectations. Given his strength and methods, he could definitely kill God King Changfeng. However, God King Changfeng's combat strength had indeed disappointed him. No matter what, he was still a peak God King. Furthermore, he wielded a king-grade superior-grade divine hammer. Fighting with him on the firmament star, he only destroyed several 100,000 miles of land and was killed within a few hours. In Ji Tianqing's estimation, the two of them would fight for 4 hours on the firmament star, then move to the void and fight for 4 to 6 hours before God King Changfeng was defeated. But he did not expect that God King Changfeng was actually a fake. Later on, he thought carefully and understood the reason. Over 1,100 years ago, God King Changfeng was still a 7th stage realm upper-ranking God King. After Kenshin perished, the 9 Suns God Emperor did not have any experts available under his command, which was why he forcefully promoted him. Under the care and nurturing of the 9 Suns God Emperor, he only used a few hundred years to become a peak god king. This was obviously pulling up seedlings to help them grow, having peak god king realm in vain, but without the corresponding strength foundation. In addition, after God King Changfeng reached peak God King realm, he had always been running errands for the Nine Sons God Emperor. He practically did not have time to go into closed-door cultivation. Not only was his foundation weak, his foundation shallow, even his magical powers and killing methods were also rather monotonous. With all sorts of conditions superimposed, his combat strength was naturally not that strong. In Ji Tianqing's evaluation, God King Changfeng completely could not be mentioned in the same breath as Golden Origin Dragon Emperor and Black Dragon Emperor. In fact, he could not even match up to Crimson Dragon Emperor Long Yen. Because of these reasons, Ji Tianqing did not have much hope for that divine hammer too. He had always thought that it was bestowed to God King Changfeng by the Nine Sons God Emperor to decorate his facade. Most likely, its power was not strong. But when he went into closed-door cultivation to refine the divine hammer and gained a deeper understanding, he then discovered that things were not so. The divine hammer was a genuine superior-grade divine weapon. It was just that God King Changfeng could not fully control it and could not unleash its full power. After all, they had already surpassed godly kings and reached a whole new level. And their so-called God Emperor realm was definitely related to the power of the heavenly Tao. Of course, these were all Ji Tianqing's speculations. As for the real situation, he would have to wait until he encountered a certain God Emperor and fought with him to know. After 5 years of cultivation, Ji Tianqing began to refine the godly hammer. This was a genuine supreme-grade god artifact. It contained a hint of Taoist rhyme and heavenly energy. Although God King Eternal Wind had died too quickly, he did not introduce the name and origin of his divine hammer. However, Ji Tianqing had refined his divine soul and memories, so he was not unfamiliar with this. The godly hammer's original name was very difficult to pronounce. It was a word and saying from ancient times. Ji Tianqing did not intend to use it. Since the godly hammer was his, he naturally had to give it a new name. The new name was hammer. It was simple and clear. Who said that powerful god artifacts had to have awe-inspiring names? As long as it was powerful enough and easy to use, the name was not important. Ji Tianqing used his mind to nourish the hammer and focused on refining it. As his mind merged with the hammer, he gained a clear understanding of the hammer. Soon, he could control it with ease. Of course, to fully unleash the hammer's power, he still had to refine it over many years. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Time flew by. Unknowingly, 2.5 years had passed in the outside world. Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing had been in seclusion for 125 years in the distorted spacetime. The first 5 years were to refine the divine spark fragments. The last 120 years were all used to refine the hammer. When he ended his seclusion, he had already refined the hammer into one of his lifeblood divine artifacts. He could unleash 100% of its power. After the undying golden body in Chaos Primordial Bell, he finally had a third trump card god artifact. After exiting seclusion, Ji Tianqing meditated for a few days. Following that, his divine sense sensed that there were several god ships rushing towards the ruins. Hence, he left the distorted spacetime and put away the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. He used his divine sense to observe carefully and saw that it was 5 god ships. Each of them was over 20,000 feet long. Their appearances were very mighty and hideous. The emblem and flag of the god ships were the blue scorpion divine king symbol. A full 2.5 years. This guy only came to the distant star. His work efficiency is too low. Ji Tianqing frowned and was somewhat dissatisfied in his heart. Swish. 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 Before long, the 5 god ships stopped above the ruins. After the doors of the god ships opened, the blue scorpion divine king was the first to fly out. Behind him were more than a dozen god king generals. The blue scorpion divine king did not know that Ji Tianqing was here. Hence, he was arrogant and dignified. He had the attitude of a big shot patrolling his territory. The dozen or so outsider generals surrounded and protected him like stars surrounding the moon. All of them had respectful postures. The blue scorpion divine king looked at the desolated ruins. His eyes could not help but twitch. He was secretly shocked. Although he did not know what the god palace looked like before it was destroyed. But looking at how messy and broken the ruins were, he could imagine what kind of great battle had taken place here. After a moment of silence, the blue scorpion divine king pointed at the ruins under his feet and said to the generals, "Do you see this? This is the evil soul god palace of the past. The dragon heaven divine king barged in alone and destroyed this god palace with his own strength. At that time, other than Marshal Laming, there were more than 10,000 god lords and close to 100 god kings guarding this place. Even though they were on high alert and raised the defense of the divine palace to the limit, they thought that they were incomparably safe. However, divine King Draconis raised this place to the ground like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, and killed everyone. The blue scorpion god king spoke as if he was the ruler of the world. When he spoke of the scene of Ji Tianqing destroying the divine palace, he could be described as high-spirited and full of pride. Those who didn't know would have thought that he was watching at the scene. Several god king generals revealed strange gazes and expressions. The blue scorpion god king immediately frowned and asked in a dignified tone, "What? You don't believe me? Do you think that there is such an invincible expert in this world?" The god kings couldn't help but nod. The blue scorpion supreme being laughed disdainfully and said with a sigh, "That's why I say you're all frogs at the bottom of a well. You all simply can't imagine how powerful peak divine kings are. As for Celestial Dragon King, he was no ordinary peak celestial king. He was the strongest among them. His strength is beyond your imagination." Seeing how confident he was, the generals were all stunned. They all revealed expressions of yearning and fantasy. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 3958. Although Ji Tianqing understood Blue Scorpion God King's intentions. The reason why he said this was to intimidate his subordinates and let them understand the power of their backer. But Ji Tianqing was present. Hearing Blue Scorpion God King's boasting, he still felt a little awkward. Seeing that Blue Scorpion God King still wanted to brainwash his subordinates, Ji Tianqing finally could not bear it any longer. Cough cough, he pretended to cough and removed his invisibility, appearing above the ruins. He stood there quietly, his expression calm and indifferent, looking at Blue Scorpion God King and the others tens of thousands of meters away. Everyone was shocked. Many of the generals subconsciously drew their swords and sabers, staring at him with vigilance. Fortunately, Blue Scorpion God King saw his face and reacted in time. "Lord Long Tian. It's actually you. Why are you here?" Blue Scorpion God King revealed a look of pleasant surprise and hurriedly flew toward Ji Tianqing with a smiling face. The dozen or so generals also reacted. They hurriedly put away their weapons and flew in front of Ji Tianqing. Everyone lined up in formation and saluted Ji Tianqing in unison, their postures respectful. Blue Scorpion God King accompanied Ji Tianqing and chatted with him, showing great concern. The dozen or so generals did not have the qualifications to speak with Ji Tianqing, so they were secretly sizing him up. All sorts of thoughts flashed through their minds. This is the Dragon Tian God King that Alliance Master spoke of. Why is he so young? He's the peak God King from the Dragon Realm. Why can't I sense his aura? It's like he doesn't exist. Is this the realm of a peak God King? Not only can I not see through his realm, I can't sense his aura. I can't even tell if he's real or an illusion. Heavens, this is the expert who killed myriad divine lords and over 100 god kings by himself. He's our backer. No one paid attention to these generals. They did not dare to show any abnormalities. They all lowered their heads and waited, listening to the conversation between Ji Tianqing and Blue Scorpion God King. Blue Scorpion, this king waited for 2.5 years before you came. Your efficiency is too low. Ji Tianqing frowned as he looked at the Blue Scorpion God King's fawning face. Blue Scorpion God King naturally knew that Ji Tianqing had long been dissatisfied with him and could replace him at any time. Therefore, he was even more submissive and groveling. Seeing Ji Tianqing's words, he hurriedly explained with a smile, "Your Excellency, please forgive me. This subordinate did not know you were here. If I knew you were waiting, I would have would have an audience with you immediately." Blue Scorpion God King said Blue Scorpion God King. Said Scorpion God Kings and Scorpion God King, s. For the Blue Scorpion Divine King to be able to come to the distant star, it meant that he already occupied more than half of the starfield. There was a God King was Tian God King. This was God King Tian. God King of course, to the north. To the north Tian God King. Blue Scorpion God King did not dare to play dumb and could only kneel and beg for forgiveness. This subordinate has not done well. Please punish me, Your Excellency. This time, he did not dare to defend himself and could only admit his guilt. Ji Tianqing's brows finally relaxed. There is still half a year. You must subdue the remaining 100 stars. Blue Scorpion God King lowered his head and said, "This subordinate will obey." However, those 100 stars are the birthplace of God King Evil Soul. He has operated for nearly 10,000 years. The forces on those stars are very loyal to him. I'm afraid it won't be easy. Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, "Loyal? Ha ha ha, will those star lords still be loyal to a dead person? If you can't do it, then this king will change to someone else." No. Blue Scorpion God King hurriedly kowtowed and begged for forgiveness. He said firmly, "No matter how difficult the mission is, this subordinate will complete it on time. Please believe in this subordinate, Your Excellency." When Ji Tianqing said to change to someone else, Blue Scorpion God King understood that it was not as simple as changing to someone else. At the very least, before changing to a puppet domain master, he would first be eliminated. Seeing Ji Tianqing nod slightly and no longer pursue the matter, Blue Scorpion God King carefully asked, "Lord Long Tian, if you don't have any other instructions, then this subordinate will take his leave and go subdue those stars now." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "There is no hurry. This king is waiting for you here because I have something to tell you." Blue Scorpion God King hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "I am willing to listen to Your Excellency's instructions." "Have you heard of Dragon Emperor Feng Tian?" Ji Tianqing looked at him and asked in a low voice. "This." Blue Scorpion God King frowned and thought for a moment before shaking his head and said, "This subordinate has never heard of this name." "Your Excellency, are you looking for this person?" Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, "Dragon Emperor Feng Tian is a dragon emperor of the dragon realm. He is a highly respected elder who usually likes to wear coarse hemp clothes, black cloth shoes, and a bamboo hat. The divine weapon that often accompanies him is a pitch-black heavenly dragon mace. 1,000 years ago, he left the dragon realm and disappeared into outer space. This king is looking for him. You need to use all your strength and do your best to gather information. As long as it is related to Dragon Emperor Feng Tian, or any information that is suspected to be related to him, you must report to this king." After Blue Scorpion God King listened carefully, he nodded solemnly and said, "Your Excellency, please don't worry. This subordinate will do his best." "Right, is that Dragon Emperor also a peak divine king?" Ji Tianqing nodded, "Of course. Blue Scorpion God King suddenly thought of something and asked, "Your Excellency, this subordinate has never heard of this Dragon Emperor's name, nor have I seen his appearance. However, in the past 1,000 years, something has happened in the Scorpion Galaxy that seems to be related to peak divine kings." Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up and asked, "What is it? When did it happen?" Blue Scorpion God King answered truthfully, "It should have happened more than 800 years ago. You also know that if you continue to head north from here, you will reach the Sirius Galaxy in a few months. Between the Scorpion Galaxy and the Sirius Galaxy, there is an enormous galaxy that has existed since ancient times. It is said that in ancient times, someone once discovered a supreme-grade divine artifact in that galaxy. And more than 800 years ago, a great war seemed to have broken out in that galaxy. Many stars were shattered and flowed out. It is said that peak divine kings fought inside and fell in the galaxy." Ji Tianqing frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Why is it all hearsay and hearsay? You don't have any concrete information?" Blue Scorpion God King revealed an ashamed expression and explained, "Your Excellency, this subordinate's territory is in the southern half. That galaxy is right next to Divine King Evil Soul's territory. This subordinate has never seen that galaxy with my own eyes, so this information is naturally hearsay. There is no way to confirm it." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "All right, then go and carry out the mission. Immediately report to this king if you have any news." Blue Scorpion God King hurriedly complied and returned to the divine ship with a dozen or so generals. They soon left. Chapter 3959. Although there was still half a year before the 3-year deadline was up, Ji Tianqing did not plan to stay in the Scorpio Galaxy and watch the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being conquer all the stars. It would be a waste of time and not very meaningful. After all, he only occupied the Scorpio Galaxy to foil the 9 Suns God Emperor's plan and inquire about the Heavenly Dragon Emperor. Now that the first step had been achieved, the next step was to see if the spies under the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being could find any clues. After the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being left the distant star, Ji Tianqing also left quietly. He rode the Sword of Burial of Heaven and continued north. If the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being could not find any information about the Heaven-Sealing Dragon Emperor, he would leave the Scorpio Galaxy and head to the galaxy between the 2 galaxies. The news the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being had mentioned was more like a hearsay story. It was hard to guarantee its authenticity. However, Ji Tianqing entering the galaxy to investigate the mystery of the Heavenly Dragon Emperor's disappearance was like finding a needle in a haystack. As long as there was even the slightest clue, he could not miss it. He had to investigate thoroughly. On the way to the galaxy, Ji Tianqing encountered many waste stars. Not to mention those barren waste stars, but all the waste stars that contained large amounts of resources, mines, and divine gold were refined and devoured by him. There were big and small waste stars, and the refining speed was also different. However, on average, Ji Tianqing took about a month to refine each waste star. In addition, he had to spend time on the way. Therefore, by the time he refined 5 waste stars, it was already half a year later. In this half a year, the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being had been on the move non-stop, conquering one star after another. Although the star lords of those hundreds of stars were very loyal to the Evil Soul Supreme Being. However, the Evil Soul Supreme Being had long been killed and no longer existed. Therefore, the various armies under the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being did not encounter any strong resistance. Occasionally, some Star Lords would gather their soldiers to resist, but they would be suppressed by the Blue Scorpion Supreme Being. If there was enough time, perhaps he would use the carrot and stick to subdue those Star Lords. However, Ji Tianqing's 3-year deadline was almost up. The Blue Scorpion God King had no patience, nor was he willing to waste time with the Star Lords. His way of doing things was very simple. Submit or die. Just like that, half a year passed. The Blue Scorpion Divine King had also occupied over 90 stars. Only 2 or 3 stars were still resisting stubbornly and had yet to declare their allegiance. The Blue Scorpion Deity King sent a message to Ji Tianqing, asking for Ji Tianqing's punishment for not completing his mission. This wasn't something that could be resolved in a few years. It would take at least a few decades or even a century. At the same time, Ji Tianqing also said that he would leave the Scorpion Star Zone and travel to other star zones. When he wasn't in the Scorpion Star Zone, he would let the Blue Scorpion God King make his own decisions. He only had one goal, and that was to firmly control the Scorpion Star Zone and strengthen his own forces as much as possible. The Blue Scorpion God King would only report to him when something major happened or an emergency occurred. To the Blue Scorpion God King, Ji Tianqing's message was undoubtedly good news that raised his spirits. This meant that Ji Tianqing had given him complete authority and trusted him completely. Apart from having to obey Ji Tianqing and follow his orders, he had great freedom and power as a domain master. This was what the Blue Scorpion God King had always dreamed of. After receiving the message, he was in a great mood and was very grateful to Ji Tianqing. However, apart from the pleasant surprise and excitement, he also had some doubts in his heart. God King Changfeng secretly supported the evil soul God King. That's profitable. Before the evil soul God King became the domain master, he had to carry out God King Changfeng's orders and do his best to plunder the resources of various stars and hand them over to God King Changfeng. Why didn't God King Long Tian order me to plunder the resources? Did he forget about this matter? Or did he feel that the situation wasn't stable yet and it wasn't time to plunder resources? Or did he never plan to squeeze the Scorpion Star Zone dry and plunder the cultivation resources of the entire star zone? This thought flashed through the Blue Scorpion God King's mind. He quietly pondered and pondered for a long time. In the end, he chose to believe the last answer. Because he could tell that Long Tian was different from ordinary peak God Kings. Compared to God King Changfeng, there was a fundamental difference. Thinking of this, the Blue Scorpion God King suddenly felt that being loyal to an expert like Long Tian wasn't a bad thing. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3960. At the edge of the Scorpio Star Zone. The stars here were sparse, and the void was relatively dark. It was very quiet. However, to the north of the Scorpio Star Zone, in the depths of the distant void, there was a huge belt of light. It was a galaxy formed by the convergence of countless stars. It was like a silver river hanging in the dark void. Even if not to find the heavenly dragon emperor, Ji Tianqing would still have to cross that galaxy on his way to the Sirius Star Zone. He stood in the void and looked back at the Scorpio Star Zone behind him. I don't know how many years it will be before I return after leaving the Scorpio Star Zone. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself and silently took out the burial of heaven. Then he entered the world and the sword and the distorted spacetime of the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower. Whoosh! The Heaven Burier sword streaked across the gloomy void, heading straight for the dazzling galaxy. Ji Tianqing cultivated in seclusion in the distorted spacetime as he hurried along. Even though void storms, black holes, spatial turbulence, and meteorites often appeared in the boundless void, the void of heaven and earth had never been so powerful. This was especially true in the open and barren areas between two star zones. The environment was even more complicated and dangerous. However, Ji Tianqing was not worried. The burial of heaven would always be alert and pay attention to the surroundings to avoid those dangers. Even if it encountered an unavoidable danger, the burial of heaven would take a detour. In short, the Heaven's Burier sword was much faster than Ji Tianqing's divine worship. It was also safer and less worrisome. Ji Tianqing had long been mentally prepared. He might not return for several hundred years after leaving the Scorpio Star Zone. Even if he was not in the Scorpio Star Zone, he was not afraid of the Blue Scorpion God King betraying him. This was because the blue scorpion god king had sworn an oath to the heavenly Tao. If he did not want to be punished by the heavens and die, he would have to obey his orders and not disobey his will. He did not care how the blue scorpion god king governed the Scorpio star zone and would not interfere. He only needed the blue scorpion god king to listen to his orders and work for him. Furthermore, Ji Tianqing had considered the possibility of the Nine Suns God Emperor personally heading to the Scorpio galaxy to avenge God King Changfeng. In that case, the Nine Suns God Emperor would definitely be able to sweep through the entire star field and kill the blue scorpion god king as easily as crushing an ant. However, Ji Tianqing had carefully analyzed the situation and concluded that the possibility of this happening was basically zero. The Nine-Yang God Emperor was busy studying the foggy star in the depths of the void. He had already spent hundreds of years studying it and couldn't leave. To the Nine-Yang God Emperor, the secrets of the foggy star were the most important. For this reason, he didn't even care about his territory in the God realm. How could he care about the Scorpio galaxy? Furthermore, God King Changfeng was only one of the Nine-Yang God Emperor's trusted subordinates. He was not a relative or a disciple. All things considered, Ji Tianqing wasn't worried about the blue scorpion god king. Moreover, even if the Nine Suns God Emperor went crazy and really went to kill the blue scorpion god king, Ji Tianqing wouldn't care. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. The burial of heaven was in the void and almost couldn't feel the passage of time. In these 2 months, it had flown more than 7 billion miles and finally arrived at the Star River between the two star fields. Just as it was about to enter the Star River, the burial of heaven awakened Ji Tianqing, who was still cultivating in seclusion. 2 months had passed in the outside world, and he had cultivated for more than 8 years. His strength had increased slightly. According to the blue scorpion god king, this star river was tens of billions of miles long and stretched from east to west, separating the celestial wolf and Scorpio galaxies. There were hundreds of thousands of stars in the Star River, and they were basically dead stars without any life. Ji Tianqing knew that the environment in this star river was abnormally harsh. Many stars would crumble and disintegrate, forming terrifying meteors. These meteors would collide with the nearby stars, causing great destruction and turbulence. Under such circumstances, every star in the Star River was very dangerous, and it was impossible for living beings to live there. Of course, there was only one possibility that was excluded. That was, some high-level God King experts didn't fear the dangers of the void and stayed on a certain star to cultivate in seclusion. 1,000 years ago, Kenshin had entered a certain star river and cultivated in seclusion for dozens of years. Ji Ke's natal divine artifact, that heavenly star chain, was created by refining dozens of stars in the Star River and spending many years to create it. Therefore, before Ji Tianqing entered the Star River, he also had a trace of hope in his heart. I hope that master hasn't died and is only sleeping in that Star River or cultivating in seclusion. The burial of heaven didn't hesitate at all and flew straight into the Star River. Very close to the Star River, one could feel the surging power of the stars and the dazzling light. In the Star River, the naked eye was useless and couldn't see anything clearly. The light here was too intense, and there were constantly dazzling lights flashing. Even a God King expert might be blinded if they looked around for a long time. Ji Tianqing had this experience, so when he was in the Star River, he either used his divine sense or borrowed the perspective of the burial of heaven. When he first entered the Star River, the surrounding stars were still scattered and not too dense. As the burial of heaven went deeper into the Star River, the surrounding stars became more and more numerous and denser. Ji Tianqing looked around and checked those dazzling stars to see if there were any abnormalities. It was worth mentioning that these stars in the Star River were all very small. The large ones were over 10 million miles in diameter, and the small ones were only a few 100,000 miles in diameter. Ji Tianqing released his divine sense and could envelop more than half of the smallest star. Although many stars contained ore veins, metals, and other resources, their grade was too low. However, the grades of these stars were too low. They were all nameless and useless stars that were not worth his time to refine. As the Heavenburier sword advanced, it soon encountered a group of flowing meteorites and a terrifying void storm. Those meteors were all star fragments. They were either pushed by the impact of explosions or dragged by the gravity of other stars, flying rapidly in the star river. Because the speed was too fast, the star fragments would constantly melt and disintegrate as they flew. Once the burial of heaven was hit by the meteors, even if it wasn't destroyed, it would be heavily injured. As for those pitch-black void storms, they could even kill and swallow everything. The smaller void storms with a radius of a few hundred to a few thousand miles were still fine. Even a God-King expert could avoid them. But if they encountered those super storms with a radius of a few 100,000 miles or 1,000,000 miles, even the stars would be swallowed and crushed into powder. Even a high God-King would be in danger if they were swept up by such super storms. But Ji Tianqing was very experienced. The burial of heaven was very careful and successfully avoided all dangers. 20 days later, the burial of heaven entered the depths of the Star River. This was the region with the brightest light and the place with the most stars. Compared to other regions, this place looked the calmest. At the very least, there were no void storms that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, nor were there endless meteorites. But many stars released terrifying heat. Some stars were surrounded by lightning, burning with heavenly fire, or frozen in ice. Every star released divine power of various attributes. They were abnormally violent and domineering. Ji Tianqing observed the surrounding stars and finally revealed a gratified smile. Let's stop. We've encountered something good. Chapter 3961. Burial of Heaven understood Ji Tianqing's nature very well. When it saw the surrounding bright stars, it guessed that Ji Tianqing would stay here and refine those stars. This was because these stars were divine stars that could only be encountered by chance and not by searching for them. The so-called divine star was a star among the billions of stars that was of a higher quality and contained boundless divine power. These stars did not have spatial barriers, which was equivalent to having no protective layer. They could be easily destroyed in the void. Moreover, the divine power contained in divine stars was too violent, so it could not give birth to living things. However, divine king experts could refine divine stars and obtain great benefits, greatly increasing their strength. Hence, to divine king powerhouses, divine stars were rarely seen great tonic items. As for the grades of stars, there were actually classifications since ancient times. In the boundless void, there were countless stars, and their number was in the trillions. Among them, 99% were nameless waste stars that could not last long and could be destroyed at any time. However, among the sea of waste stars, there were occasionally larger ones that contained more ores and metals. Just like those stars that Ji Tianqing had refined previously. Stars that were one grade higher than nameless waste stars were called positive stars, and there were nearly 1 billion of them. Positive stars were stars that were stable in size, quality, and composition. They could not be destroyed easily and could last for a long time. The shortest lifespan was a few 100,000 years, while the longest lifespan was 100 million years. Above positive stars were large stars, and there were as many as 10 million of them. Large stars were stars that were larger in size and often had spatial barriers. They could give birth to the 5 elements, wind, and lightning, and then evolve into living things. Just like the countless worlds in the lower realm, they were all considered large stars. Stars that were of higher quality than large stars were divine stars that Ji Tianqing had seen so far, which contained violent divine power. Although divine stars were of high quality, they did not have spatial barriers and could not evolve into living things. They were not suitable for living things to live in. Above divine stars, there were a few 100,000 earthly fiend stars and close to 10,000 Big Dipper stars. For example, in the 9 major galaxies, those stars with countless foreign races living were basically earthly fiend stars. These stars were even larger in size, with a diameter of more than 100 million miles, and could accommodate billions of living things. With Ji Tianqing's current strength and methods, he could spend a few years to refine those earthly fiend stars. However, the prerequisite was that he had to destroy the billions of living beings on the planet. He would never do such a thing. As for the strength star, it was a star that was even larger than the earthly fiend star and of a higher quality. The distant star of the Scorpio galaxy was a Big Dipper star. That star not only had a strong spatial barrier and a stable quality, but it also contained an abundance of divine power. It was the most suitable star for gods to live in and cultivate. Also, above the earthly fiend star and the Big Dipper star, there was still the star with the highest known quality so far. Stars. As the name implied, it was an eternal existence, a star that was almost indestructible. A star of this level had the most stable structure, the most abundant divine power, and the safest environment. It was the holy land for gods to cultivate. For example, the dragon realm and the god realm. Of course, some stars contained too much power and were not suitable for gods to live in. According to ancient legends, there were 99 stars, including the god realm and the dragon realm. However, Ji Tianqing had traveled to all the major star domains, but he had only been able to identify a dozen stars. As for the other stars, he did not know where they were. He wasn't even sure if so many stars really existed. He had reason to suspect that the number 99 was just a figment of the ancients' imagination. 7, 18, 39, 74, Ji Tianqing left the sword of the burial of heaven and stood in the galaxy, looking around and silently counting the number of divine stars. In just a short while, he found more than 100 divine stars in the galaxy around him. Such a harvest is comparable to 2 supreme-grade king-level divine artifacts. He was excited and gratified. Even if he did not find any clues related to his master in the galaxy, being able to find so many divine stars meant that this trip was not in vain. At the same time, he also believed the news that the Blue Scorpion Divine King had heard. In ancient times, supreme-grade divine artifacts might have really been born in this galaxy. Of course, they were not man-made, but supreme-grade divine artifacts that were born in the galaxy. More than 800 years ago, there might have really been peak god kings who came here and fought over divine stars. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and put away the sword of the burial of heaven. He flew toward the nearest divine star. This was a divine star filled with heavenly fire. It was completely red and almost transparent, releasing violent divine energy waves. Ji Tianqing landed on the divine star and felt the violent power of the star. It's almost equivalent to a 9th-level god king. Ordinary high-level god kings can't refine it. Only peak god kings can. This thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately made a judgment. Then, he took out the heaven-mending orb and started to cast a spell. Swoosh! The heaven-mending orb expanded to a radius of 10,000 miles. It floated on the surface of the heavenly fire divine star and released billions of rays of white light that enveloped the entire star. The white light formed a huge net that enveloped the star and quickly devoured it. Thus, the power of the heavenly fire divine star was quickly depleted, and its size gradually shrank. A huge amount of minerals and metals were sent to the 5 elements world by the heaven-mending orb. The endless divine fire and star power were refined by Ji Tianqing to increase his strength and strengthen his foundation of the divine path. Ji Tianqing focused on refining the divine star and forgot about the passage of time. 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, 3 months passed unknowingly. The heavenly fire divine star with a diameter of more than 30 million miles disappeared from the galaxy. The five elements world was greatly improved and expanded further. A spiritual energy storm swept through the entire world. Ji Tianqing's strength also increased steadily, advancing toward the late stage of the 9th level God King. After refining the heavenly fire divine star, he didn't feel tired at all. Instead, he was in high spirits. He flew to another divine star surrounded by lightning and began to devour the second divine star. The power of the thunder divine star was even more violent than the heavenly fire divine star. Ji Tianqing's process of devouring this divine star wasn't smooth. There was an accident. When the thunder divine star shrank by half, the structure of the star became unstable and collapsed. Thus, the peerlessly violent divine power of thunder erupted, exploding into a lightning ball with a radius of 100 million miles. The shocking sound of the explosion could no longer be described as deafening. The nearby divine stars were shaken to the point that they were on the verge of collapse. Some of them were even pushed back millions of miles. If it were any other peak God King, they would definitely be injured by such an accident. However, Ji Tianqing understood the divine stars very well and was already mentally prepared. When the thunder divine star exploded, he instantly took out the primal chaos primordial bell to block the impact of the star's explosion. Although he was pushed back millions of miles, he was unharmed. After the aftermath of the lightning explosion, he continued to devour the third divine star, a blue star that was sealed in ice. This time, the process of devouring was very smooth. There were no setbacks. Just like this, Ji Tianqing continuously devoured divine stars one after another. These divine stars in the galaxy were disappearing at a rate of 4 to 5 per year. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.